Hello and welcome to Rewind Reviews, a podcast where we take a look at movies from our past and ask the question, does it hold up? The answer, no! It might be worse than I remember, and I thought it was shit when I saw it originally. Today we are talking about the absolutely abominable mess that is Attack of the Clones. I'm putting my thoughts on Front Street this week, Chris. I don't know if you've noticed my little subtle hint there. I didn't like it. Really hated watching this movie. It's painful on almost every level. Very few redeeming factors. Please tell me that you at least enjoyed something about it, so this isn't just a 2-hour bitch fest.
No, not really.
No. It's a mess, isn't it?
I got a bit of a cough. Apologies. I thought the idea of the sort of factory scene at the end, you know, where he's getting his arm stuck and then she's stuck in the pot that's going to have lava poured on her. I thought the idea of that was quite Star Wars, and I enjoyed watching the movie going, oh, wow, they really did some sort of revisionist history building around this movie and building around things like, you know, the clones and all of that sort of stuff. Because it's pretty hard to understand in this movie. It's not really, it meanders. Sorry, I meant to be saying good things. Good things.
Yeah. All right.
There's some coolish visuals, maybe.
Nope. Nope. I hate the visuals. It's a fucking ugly movie. I'll tell you what. I'm going to start us off with a quote from George Lucas during the production of this movie. Would you like me to read this quote? Because I think we might actually just be able to end our reviews of the prequel trilogy here and now with this one quote. When I did Star Wars, the whole project was an exercise in reining myself in and designing the film to get maximum amounts of strange environments and exciting spaceship action out of very, very little. I don't really have to rein myself in anymore.
Yeah, I think Obi-Wan searching for clues in a New York diner shows that he didn't have to rein himself in anymore.
I've just realised we'll get to the 50s diner. I am sat in a wicker chair, and I've realised that every single time I move, it makes noise. So I'm gonna subtly as I can swap to a chair that's less noisy than this one. I didn't realise I'd done that. One sec.
How many types of chair have you got?
Well, so this is the place we're staying at the moment. It came with furniture, and it feels like over the years, you know, things have broken and they've replaced random bits. So we got two pretty solid. I'm not even at the mic really. One second. We've got two quite solid chairs that are pretty sturdy, and then we've got this sort of like weird wicker chair that looks like it was sort of acquired as a sort of a replacement for a previously broken chair. And then we got the big couch, which is very comfortable, but there's no table there for me to put the mic on. Oh, I could have moved the little thingy table around. Oh, I've just realised I could have sat at the couch, which would have been way more comfortable. Anyway, I'm no longer squeaking every time I move. Wicker chairs make such a specific noise as well, so I'm really sorry to anyone who heard that through the first few minutes of this podcast. Yeah, look, 50s diner. Let's just break it down. Let's break it down. Let's start. We usually start our history with the movie. Do you remember when you first saw the movie, Chris, and your experience watching the movie the first time?
I remember thinking it was visually weird, like cartoonish, CGI-like, and visually weird. I remember, much to my shame, I'm not proud of this. I remember watching it with some mates in the cinema, and we were. I mean, what year did this film come out then?
Oh God, you're asking the questions. This came out in would have been 2002. 2002.
Yeah, 2002. So we're around 13, 14.
Yeah.
So
like I was 14 when this movie came out. No, 15 when this movie came out. Because I was 12 when the last one came out, and there was 3 years. So yeah, you'd have been around 13, 14.
And I remember sitting there and in all the romantic scenes, and I use those words lightly, doing kind of like go on, yeah, like jokey, like not even like not genuine, but like jokey kind of, yeah, go on, Anakin, yeah. And that got progressively worse in like kind of what we were saying, and then at the end of the film, this I really hate. I'm genuinely ashamed of it. But if the question is, what do I remember about watching this movie? It is this shame. When the lights went up, it became apparent that there was a mother with 2 young children sat directly in front of us.
Oh no!
And the mother
that is a disaster.
And the mother gave us a real look, and I was like, oh shit, sorry. Didn't realise that was the case.
Well,
which we didn't, and we weren't those type of teenagers. We wouldn't have done that deliberately.
I mean, I think that's,
I remember that.
Is that not saying a lot though about like the fact that like all, you know, this is this is supposed to be this big epic piece of the Star Wars saga, full of thrills and action and adventure. And all you could fucking think to do was make comments like that, because the movie gives you so little else. I mean, because look, I was 15 when I saw this movie. I'm not going to lie and say I wasn't very pleased to see a huge amount of Natalie Portman's midriff. But at the same time, watching it now as an adult man, just like, oh, why even is her midriff showing?
Oh god, it's so weird.
It's such a weird moment,
weird.
because the thing slashes her back, and then suddenly the entire bottom of her shirt is gone. And you do see the fabric floating away, but the thing didn't cut her all around. So it's very peculiar.
It's so weird.
It's such a weird thing. But
she just becomes like... like she becomes Lara Croft in the last act.
It's weird.
Really,
and then, I'm sat, like, even now watching it, like, oh yeah, this was definitely 15-year-old Dan's. Like, this was, I guess, the equivalent of, like, all the young boys that saw, you know, Leia with the gold bikini in the original one. Natalie Portman is obviously a very attractive human being. And she's in the movie, and there are some times in the movie where she's not wearing let's say the most practical outfits. We'll put it that way. For better or worse. And I know the worst offending outfit, the scene when she sat down in the most romantic firelit room to tell Anakin they can't be together, and she's wearing like a low-cut corset, which, by the way, designed by George Lucas himself directly. He drew the outfit he wanted. Yeah, I know. But, like, again, I'm sitting here going, like, what else is there to this movie? If that's my big memory, I mean, look, my memory of seeing the film at the cinema was just finding it a slog. Like, even as a kid, just bored, like, unengaged. Like, none of this, like, worked for me. I wasn't excited by the action scenes. I remember coming out feeling frustrated by this movie. And the excitement I had for this movie going into it was really high, because, like with a lot of these prequel movies, that I'm getting to see things I've always wanted to see. But I assumed I'd get to see them alongside a coherent story and an interesting character arc, and, you know, the things that usually a film has alongside it, you know, to make it function. Because, you know, let's take a look at Infinity War. No, not Infinity War, Endgame. The payoff of Endgame alone would not be a satisfying movie. They earn that through 2 hours of storytelling first, where the characters are genuinely in a situation where you sort of go like they've been beaten already. They were beaten at the end of the previous movie. We've set up a situation where I genuinely think it seems pretty unlikely they could potentially win. That way, when the thing I always wanted to see happens, which is the big lineup, the whole crew, that is both satisfying on a storytelling perspective because they've got backup, they're not so outnumbered, but also I'm getting to see the cool thing I wanted to see, right? It's you've got to mesh the two. So I'm there going like, yeah, I always wanted to see a big group of Jedi going into a big epic battle with lots and lots of, you know, enemies. So there's just dozens of lightsabers running around. That's a really cool visual that I kind of, young me, always wanted to see. But I don't give a shit about this fight. I don't understand why any of these people are fighting at all. And I'm not even saying I didn't understand the plot of the movie. I'm just like, this just doesn't engage me in those reasons. They don't seem believable. Also there's barely goals for any of these characters in this fucking movie. No one, like, what? Okay, exercise. Tell me the plot of the movie. Just summarize the plot of the movie.
Exactly.
Like anyone, if you're listening to this genuinely, because you might go, well, it's about investigating the assassination attempt at Padme. Yeah, for the first 20 minutes. What's it about then? Oh, well, then they're looking after. They're trying to find the attacker. Like on a, okay. Then they're trying to find Camino, and then they're investigating who ordered these clones. We don't get an answer to that. But then they have to go capture Jango Fett because they get captured. Well, they have to rescue Obi-Wan as well, actually, because he's been captured. And it's just like all these things just keep happening, and they feel arbitrary and unearned, and it just never leads to anything. And nobody grows, nobody learns, no one is on this adventure. No, there's no protagonist or antagonist. What a fucking mess this film is, top to bottom. I can't believe anyone watches this movie and enjoys it. Genuinely, it's so bafflingly bad. So yeah, that's overall thoughts.
But that's not even going into the appalling visuals, the appalling dialogue.
Yep.
The dialogue, I mean, it's so much worse than Phantom Menace. It's insane.
It's incredible.
It's awful. And like I say, the confusion about you've got the a quote. Excuse me. Sorry. Apologies if that's unpleasant. You've got a villain, quote unquote, that doesn't have a plan or do anything. Like Dooku's just sort of there. Like he's just there. And also it doesn't even, I was watching it going, I forgot, I didn't realise how little this film played up the promise of the ending of the last one, but that really cool shot of thingamajig, Palpatine. And you're like, oh, we're gonna see Palpatine's story unfold, and like, no, he's just sort of, oh, by the way, it's him in the background. And like I say, the confusion of, because obviously I remember, Order 66 and what happens around that, but I'm sat there going, but Obi-Wan is on this planet because he has followed someone that was on the clone planet, like Planet of the Clones, like where the clones were being created. So Obi-Wan has followed him from Clone Planet to where they are now.
Geonosis, yeah.
And Geonosis, and then the guy, and then Jango is also there with the people they're fighting. What about that scenario didn't make him go, oh, guys, maybe I don't know what probably shouldn't be using these clones as our actual army. Like this Jedi who's no longer around ordered them in a shady way, and then suddenly Yoda turns up they all turn up at the end with them, and you're like, but when did they even? So what as they were thinking about it, were they like, well, we've got an army, no one voted for it, no one knew it was there, and we were all against it, but fuck it, let's pop by and get it. And then go and fight these people that we've been led to because of this army. Did no one think we should probably look into this, guys? Because that feels a little suspect. And when you watch it back, you just like, especially with knowing the context, it makes a bit of sense. But I'm sat there going, how did this make any fucking sense for anyone watching it? Yeah. Why was no one scratching their head going, hold on, what? Like, I thought, what? Like, huh?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is I think the answers are sort of in the subtext, a lot of it, but like also I'd say a Star Wars fan would tell you, well, that's the whole point, it was all supposed to be confusing because Palpatine was working from the shadows, blah blah blah, and also like with the clones, like there's the whole. So for those who don't remember, or just didn't follow it because it's not particularly clear, one of the things that's going on in this movie is that the Republic has fractured. There is a separatist movement that they establish in like one of the opening scenes where there are many planets that have left the Republic. They no longer trust the Republic. And there's fear because they've aligned themselves with the Trade Federation and other forces that do actually have a military, that the Republic is in danger because it doesn't have an army to defend itself with. And the whole movie starts with Padme is on Coruscant, risking her life because she knows she's a target, refusing to leave because she wants to take part in a vote to not militarize the Republic. She does not believe they should have an army. And what happens in the end is she gives the power, senatorship of Naboo, or whatever, like a proxy thing, to Jar Jar. And it's Jar Jar that eventually puts forward the vote that gives Palpatine emergency powers That he's like, I promise I'll put these powers down as soon as we've defeated these separatists. Oh, by the way, through coincidence, we actually have access to an army now. Someone ordered them years ago on our behalf. It's kind of weird, but we're just going to go with it. And the problem is, someone will say, oh, well, the whole point is that the Jedi were comfortable and arrogant and they never saw it coming and they should have. And that's like the story. It's the story of the downfall of the Jedi out of their own arrogance. But I would say to that, it's one thing to make them have the downfall of their own arrogance, but another thing to make them look so completely and utterly inept and stupid, and only one passing line to try and make it make sense, which is a line from Yoda where he goes, well, the dark side has shrouded us. We can't let the Sith know that our powers to detect things are weakened right now. He doesn't say it like that because he's Yoda. He says it all backwards. But what? So just because the Sith are back, as revealed in the last movie, it shrouded the Jedi's ability to sense things. Well, I'm sorry, you don't need the power to sense things to see how manipulative Palpatine is being. It doesn't take a genius to figure out you're being played here. Like, someone put in an order for an army. Well, how convenient, because we just voted that we can finally have one. That doesn't seem fishy. Let's go with that. And here's the thing, and I know what people are going to say as well. Oh, well, if you watch the Clone Wars series, I know, the Clone Wars series makes it make a lot more fucking sense. I understand that. I really do. And it does fix a lot of these problems. But we're not reviewing the Clone Wars series right now. We're reviewing these three movies as they stand, and they do not stand. Sorry, that was quite a rant.
Because they even talk about it. And I suppose that probably... like I said earlier, like the revisionist of it probably has given people more warmth towards this movie, because like even at the end of the movie when there's like the Clone Wars have begun, I imagine now there's a lot of reverence to that for people. But again, watching just this movie in isolation when it first came out, that wouldn't have meant anything. Because it's the first time it's been mentioned. But I do genuinely think like I watched a thing last night because it came up on my algorithms, whatever. But I watched a little thing about Order 66, and I'm like, fucking hell, they went into detail about that in the TV shows, didn't they? Like they really showed that. Yeah. Like, and I've realised, and
it's amazing. I mean, look, some of the best stuff from the prequel era is the Clone Wars TV series. It's amazing. There's some really great storytelling in there, and they do whole episodes. Like, there's an episode of the Clone Wars purely dedicated to explaining Master Sifo Dyas and who he was, and how this clone army got ordered, like who went and made them and why, basically. And it's a good story. I forget the name of the episode, but people should look it up. It's a really good episode of the Clone Wars. It's called the something one, I think, like the Chosen One, or the... Oh no, maybe not that. I can't remember now, but it's a great episode of Clone Wars, and it fills in a lot of gaps. But I think as well, right? Because you know what though, So here's the thing as well. Watching this time has actually solidified my thoughts weirdly on. It's called The Lost Ones. I just found it. There you go. It's called The Lost Ones. On the Phantom Menace, because I'm watching the Phantom Menace going like, I don't hate this, but it's not great. And I'm realizing now it's the lack of a lead character in both these movies, and the lack of a proper clear villain, because the villain is in the shadows, the Phantom Menace, whatever. There's never a person who's openly the antagonist beyond someone who they can fight. So Darth Maul is simply a weapon being sent at them by a villain who has a motive. Darth Maul's motive is just doing his master's bidding. That's not a particularly exciting antagonist. Count Dooku maybe has hints of being more interesting. He's a fallen Jedi, but they don't do anything with that. So what you've got in the end then is they're the Jedi, they're the good guys, these are the not Jedi, these are the bad guys, and they're going to throw things at each other and hit each other with sticks for a bit. And you're going to like it. And I'm like, I'm not invested in any of these people or these situations because there's no humanity to it. And at least with Phantom Menace, there was a pretty fast-paced adventure to distract me from the fact that there was no humanity, no emotional core to the movie. The closest you get is Qui-Gon wanting to train Anakin, but that was because of some prophecy. That wasn't an emotional storyline. The fact that he dies at the end is only emotional to me because I saw Obi-Wan go, no, and then get mad. Their relationship wasn't properly a part of the movie, really, other than them being like kind of cold and Jedi-y to each other. The lack of emotion in the storytelling of this movie and the movie before it is really where they fall apart. And at least Phantom Menace has a kind of a brisk adventure to sweep me off, through a series of exciting situations to at least distract me from that. This one doesn't even have that. It is, Chris, and I checked this, 1 hour and 3 minutes for the first action scene that isn't the chase.
Wow.
So there's a car chase, sort of 15, 20 minutes in. Other than that, it's 1 hour and 3 minutes into the movie when an actual action sequence occurs. And I don't just need shiny lights, by the way. I'm just saying, though, for a movie that's supposed to be a rip-roaring, adventure across space and stuff, like, the adventures of a hero or whatever, I'm not seeing a hero and I'm not seeing the adventures. What I am seeing is a lot of very undercooked space politics that doesn't go anywhere.
Well, yeah, it's very dull. And space politics that also you just question the logic of, like when she's thinking it's Count Dooku that I am saying that name right, aren't I?
Count Dooku, yes.
Count Dooku. The Queen thinks it's she's not the Queen now, is she? But Natalie Padme says she thinks it might be him, and Mace Windu's like, no, it can't be him. He used to be a Jedi. It's like, hold on a second, used to be a Jedi. Doesn't that suggest that he changed? Yeah. That his character might have changed slightly. Yeah. Like, what do you mean used to be a Jedi? Like, I didn't know that was an option. I thought you were in for life, and therefore, if he's chosen not to be,
but then you that's like a little tease of an idea that's interesting. Well, what does that look like? What is a fallen Jedi? What is the ideology of someone who chose to leave the Jedi? That's interesting. Are we going to explore it? No, of course we're fucking not. Because that would be too engaging. And this movie wants to put me to fucking sleep when it's not bewildering me with bizarre choices. Yeah. So it's a dull, pointless slog of a movie. It has the facade of being important to the overall plot, but actually it barely adds anything to the lore beyond a lot of like, oh, this is how the chess pieces moved, so this thing you knew happened. Cool. I can tick off knowing what the Clone Wars is, that brief thing that Obi-Wan mentioned casually in the first movie. I can tick off now knowing what that is. But what else is this movie bringing me?
Oh, okay. It was mentioned in okay. So maybe the Clone Wars have begun. Maybe there was a little bit of reverence for that then in the day.
Yeah, but like. Yeah, but like it was because it's such a passing comment. Like Obi-Wan gives Luke the lightsaber in A New Hope, and he's like, your father was a pilot with me in the Clone Wars, and it's such a passing, it's such a throwaway comment, right? Not every throwaway comment needs to become a fucking giant storyline in of itself. You know what I mean? So yeah, that was
for sure.
I don't know. I found huge swaths of this movie deeply frustrating to watch from a few perspectives, and the perspective that most surprised me, truthfully, the visuals. Another quote here from Mr. Lucas. I would say over half the sets are entirely digitally created. Yeah, I would say that too, George. Do you remember in the last movie when Liam Neeson was so tall, it meant they had to build the physical sets a little taller because they were only CGIing the stuff above head height, because obviously a character against a completely CGI creation sometimes stands out. So you build a physical set, ground level, for the characters to stand in front of with real tangible things, and then what you do is you build CGI stuff outside and around of that to build the world out. Remember that? Remember that, Chris? Well, this time they shot almost everything in front of blue screens, and it fucking sucks.
Yeah, like the technology, I don't think in 2002, 2001, when it was probably filmed, 2000, whatever. I feel like the technology wasn't there to do an entire movie this way.
Honestly, I don't think the technology is there now. I like the problem is it isn't the use of the CGI, because I think a lot of people would. If I said my complaint is too much CGI, I think it's easy for someone to say, well, you know, we're living in a Marvel world. What do you mean too much CGI? But I'm not saying that the movie uses CGI in too many of its scenes. I'm saying that when it is used in the scene, it's making up too much of the image. There aren't enough tangible things to tie you into a real world that you then enhance with CGI. CGI works best when it's enhancing a real thing that was shot on the day, right? Jurassic Park still looks amazing to this day. And it was a movie made about 8 years before this one. And the reason Jurassic Park still looks amazing to this day is because they had physical props and replicas of the dinosaurs on set, and the sets were completely real, or the outdoor locations, and they moved them around physically with puppetry and all that stuff, and then they CGI'd over them to improve their flexibility, movability, making them look a lot more realistic. But they had a weight to them because of that. The production designer of this fucking movie said, the more real things you can get into your image, the more believable those things are. Yeah, Gavin Baquette, that's true. So what the fuck happened here? Because that's not what this movie is. This movie is people stood in rooms entirely made of blue and or green. I don't know if they use blue or green screen in this movie, whatever. With almost no practical thing other than maybe some sand on the floor. Nothing feels tangible. Nothing feels real. This is the fucking ugliest movie I've sat through in some time. What an absolute shocker. What a despicable fucking effort. And it all goes back to Lucas and I don't really have to rein myself in anymore. That's what it comes back to. He wanted to do the technology. He didn't want to have to go to the sets because he couldn't be asked. Well, no, couldn't be asked. They did do some location shooting. They shot in Italy and they went back. They went back to where they shot in Tunisia. The Tatooine stuff. But he even shot a couple of shots for episode 3 here because he, quote, didn't want to have to come back. He if he could have just shot everything in a controlled environment in front of a blue and green screen, he literally would have. And he would have been happy doing it.
In that little speech there, Dan,
mm-hmm.
Did you say there was sand on the floor?
Yeah.
'Cause, I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating.
It gets
everywhere.
Yeah. You know what the worst part about that is? I watched that scene yesterday, right? And I remembered that scene is kind of ridiculous, What I didn't remember is that he then switches that into a move. I didn't realize, because that quote gets thrown around a lot, right? Because it is quite funny. It's a ridiculous quote. But I think what's even worse is that he's then unlike things here, things are smooth. Then he leans in and he goes, things on Naboo are soft and smooth. And then he uses it as an excuse to lean in for a kiss. I'm sorry. The fact it works is mind-boggling. And in fact, I genuinely think the most unrealistic thing in the entire of Star Wars, the most unrealistic thing in the entire Star Wars, I'm going to repeat it for emphasis, is the idea that anyone would find that charming.
I think their whole relationship in this movie, it's insane.
Yeah, I would love to hear you talk on that. You're our resident love story guy. What's the deal? Come on, make this make sense for me.
Every element of it is insane. He's really creepy to begin with.
Yep.
I know everything going on in that bedroom, I can assure you. Oh God.
Well, she even tells him. There's a point when she says, don't look at me like that. You're making me uncomfortable.
Don't look at me like that. You're making it comfortable.
Why would you put those words into her mouth?
You'll always be that 9-year-old boy on Tatooine. They barely spend any time together. Mm. And then there's I hate, one of my pet peeves is the notion, we've talked about this before, I think, on other podcasts, the notion that if you're doing a love story, you have to reach a point where the character, like the conclusion has to be the character saying "I love you," which is such horseshit. You can just get the characters together, especially like this. If it's in a short space of time, you don't need "I love you." You just have them be together. Like that's fine. Because what I love is the "I love you" scene feels like it comes. You're like, what? You've barely spent any time together. What the fuck are you? What are you talking about? I love you. Like what? What do you mean? And then it's so bad because it's like they double down. It's not just "I love you." She's then like, "I truly, deeply do love you." It's like, oh, don't make it worse. Come on now. I think the problem at its core is actually in some ways the Phantom Menace, because they are trying to make their history within the Phantom Menace have a lot of reverence in this film. You know, he's very much like, I've thought about her every day since, and they are trying to play it as, well, they've always had a connection, they've always felt that destiny for each other. But in the first film, he was a little boy, and like you just kind of go, it's maybe more comfortable if Anakin was older in the Phantom Menace, and you start to go, maybe he should have been. I mean, maybe then he's literally way too old to start his Jedi training or some bullshit like that. But like, I feel like a lot of it between Obi-Wan as well, Obi-Wan and Anakin would be better if Anakin was older in Phantom Menace, and Anakin and Padme especially. They are trying to treat their history with some sort of reverence, like it wasn't a couple of days in that movie, and you just kind of go, this is mad. Like, he's creepy, he's weird, she's not into it, and then suddenly she loves him because they've, I don't know, rolled around in the grass. Oh, and also because you know he's in a lot of pain because of his mum. By the way, he tells her he's killed children.
Yeah, this movie is a great way to set up a couple that don't end up together. Like she has every reason in the world to not like this guy. So literally, right? Let's list all the reasons. Let's list all the reasons she shouldn't love him, and then we'll see if we can come up with the same number of reasons she should. Reason number 1: when he looks at her that way, he makes her feel uncomfortable. Reason number 2: when she met him, he was a child, and that just feels icky. Reason number 3: politically, he seems pretty on board with a dictatorship, and then goes, kidding, but you don't believe that he's kidding. So she's all for democracy. She is the most person for democracy in the Star Wars movies. And he's like, yeah, dictatorship wouldn't be so bad. But if that isn't a red flag, ladies, I don't know what is. Then he... I'm trying to think... Oh, God. I'm trying to think in the order of the sequence of the movie.
Right, okay.
Oh, the sand thing, where he tries to shoehorn his complaints about sand into things being soft and smooth, and leans in for a kiss. Sorry, nope, ick.
Which by the way, he's manipulative, because later on he says, the kiss you shouldn't have given me.
Yeah.
Like that's somehow her thing.
Yeah, some manipulation. He leaned in, but it's the kiss she shouldn't have given. Absolutely, manipulation. That's another red flag, guys. Then weird prophetic dreams about his mother that forces him to run off because he's going to go murder a bunch of people. Have we missed one?
Can we? Arrogance. In many ways, I'm better than Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah. Absolute arrogance. Childish little rants. It's not fair. A big ick. No, ick. Just no. And then you add murdering a bunch of women, children, and men because their tribe took the thing, and then being like, they deserved it, and I wanted to murder them all. I've got over. I think I've gone to 10. I was counting on my hands, and I don't even think we've done the whole movie. So she marries him at the end. So what are the pluses? Rolling around in a field, and he cuts her apple for her, or pear, whatever it is. You got any more on the sick side?
He makes her laugh a few times.
Does he?
I think so.
Yeah, all right.
They seem to be a good team at the end with the fight.
Okay.
But these aren't reasons, people. It's a truly
so strange.
It's a truly awful love story. Like, you genuinely and listen, seriously, people heard us last week. We defended and enjoyed the Phantom Menace. Like this isn't. Oh, we just want to bash the prequels. I would have loved, I genuinely would love to be sat here going, it's not as bad as you think, guys. Yeah. Like it's not. Like, don't worry about it. But it's awful, and especially the love story between these two is so appallingly written. and I'm sorry. Like, well, let's talk about this now, Dan. I can't. Is it the acting or is it the writing? Are they doing the best job with what they've got, or is the acting not brilliant? What are your thoughts?
I think a tiny bit of both. No, let me rephrase that actually, because I think I think it leans more towards the writing, but I do also think inexperience comes into play, because when you look at someone like Ewan McGregor, who is an extremely experienced and very, very talented actor, Ewan makes it work. Hayden never had a chance because he's given that bad dialogue and he's young enough to not really know how to make that function. I think the dialogue is still the root cause, but we have proven throughout the Star Wars movies that were written fully by George Lucas that there are ways around it if you're an Alec Guinness or a Carrie Fisher. Do you know what I mean? Like, there are certain, like, actors that have come through these movies that have made it function. But let's not be blind to the fact that Mark Hamill didn't exactly come off completely naturally the first time round either. Again, as several actors who've been on George Lucas written movies before, you can write this stuff, but you sure can't say it. You know, famous for it, like famous for not being able to do, not being able to write very well. And I think, looking at it now, you go, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like, so I would say only a very small percentage of the blame for this performance is on Hayden, because I think he was, George has always famously also not been a very hands-on director on set. Apparently he's famous for just saying faster, more intense when he doesn't know what to do with the actors when it isn't clicking. He just says faster, more intense. That's his thing. He's not very good at working with the actors, and he's admitted that. In fact, to the point where, if memory serves, the trivia for last week's episode was one of the reasons he was looking for someone else to work with him directing The Phantom Menace was someone specifically who could work with the actors, because he knew it wasn't in his skill set. So at least he's aware. So you've got bad dialogue, an inexperienced actor who is very talented but just green, and then a director that's not willing to work with him on set with it.
Yeah, he was good in He was good in Obi-Wan, wasn't he? And isn't there an indie film which he's like, his performance was really
I think he's praised. A perfectly talented, charming actor, and I think he was just given a bum thing here. Also, this idea of doing a love story alongside, I think the big problem really, ultimately, is the choice from a conceptual perspective, to do a movie that's both a man's downfall to evil at the same time as that, with that same character doing a love story. Because I think what really we should have done here is had him be happy, cheerful, not at all showing huge amounts of signs of the dark side. Maybe the tiniest shadow of something, like a really subtle one, but mostly have him be the Luke Skywalker of this movie, plucky hero, because then it's more satisfying in the next movie when you come back. We're at the tail end of a years-long war that's worn him down, ground the joy out of him. His relationship with Padme is rockier. It's way more believable to do it that way than this sort of like half measure where we're trying to do both at the same time, but they're actually kind of hurting each other. The love story is trying to make him likable, because you've got to believe he's likable, because you've got to believe Padme wants to be with him, but you've also got to have him, murder the Sand People, and not just as the warriors, but the women and children, as he says it. I think conceptually you fucked up here too. I can't even say there are good ideas here, because I think the idea to do both those things in this one movie is horrendous. So, yeah, what a mess, man. I cannot get over how bad this movie is. I really, like you, was really hoping to come in like, look, it's still not great. Maybe it's still the weakest of the prequels, but I found all this good in it that I can point to and be like, yeah, that worked, that worked, that worked. And the thing is, as well, you get a lot of these reviews of people pulling up nitpicks that are also valid, like totally valid. Why is there a 50s diner if it's in a galaxy far, far away? You know, it's a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Well, how did they have the 50s? I don't understand. You know, you could nitpick that stuff to death all day, but here's the thing. None of that stuff would matter if the rest of the movie worked. You'd absolutely, happily dismiss that if the rest of the movie worked. And the people who do nitpicks about Phantom Menace, same. Oh, when Anakin gets in that ship that's not meant for him, he finds a little helmet that fits his head when he flies off to be a spaceship. Where did he get a little helmet that fits his little head? Shouldn't the helmet that was in there have been for an adult pilot's head? Yeah, probably should have been. Does not matter. Irrelevant. Yeah. Like, it is a nitpick, and it is a valid complaint if we're just playing the let's poke holes in the movie thing. But in the grand scheme of things, stuff like that would not matter if the rest of the movie functioned. And the reason people pull up these nitpicks is because the rest of the movie doesn't function. And the first one has Phantom Menace has some pretty serious issues, but gets away with it on the whole by being a reasonably fun adventure, a light-hearted adventure. And in this movie, they don't even have that to fall back on. So you're just left with the stuff that didn't work about Phantom Menace, just really rearing its ugly head. Oh, it's such a mess. I don't know, man. I don't know. There's got to be something good in this movie, Chris. Anything?
Yeah, Ewan McGregor's doing his best, isn't he?
Yeah, I like Ewan McGregor. He's good.
Samuel L. Jackson's got a purple lightsaber.
Yep.
It's fun, I guess. Don't really do a lot else. I'm excited to see if Mace Windu does anything in the third movie.
He famously does something. There's one thing he does very famously in the third movie.
Yeah, that's true. And arguably this movie as well, because here's a compliment, Dan.
Yep.
You ready for this?
Go on.
Let's go, baby. The shot of young Boba holding Django's head and holding the helmet. Mm-hmm. Although when you realise like his severed head is in there, it sort of takes the
it technically isn't. If you watch the shot when Mace does it, two things fly away. The helmet goes up into the air, and you see the shadow of an object drop out of the helmet. But it's very quick because obviously you don't want to piss off the sensors. So the helmet that rolls away is an empty helmet. But apparently, I read that at one point Lucas toyed with the idea of when Boba lifts up the helmet, the head falls out. Which is horrendous.
Can't be real. Seriously?
Look, I can't criticize an almost choice because sense took over at some point and he chose not to do that. But that is mad that was ever a consideration, even for a second. That's an insane choice. Anyway, so the helmet is technically empty, I will say.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. So yeah, I think that shot's quite good. But I will say, whilst I think that shot is quite cool, I think that we praised Phantom Menace for how it did fan service and how, you know, sort of having Jar Jar there, but it doesn't interrupt things if you don't. Not Jar Jar, sorry.
C-3PO?
Who's the mob guy? Huh? No, the mob guy who was in the Phantom Menace.
Oh, Jabba the Hutt.
First movies. Jabba the Hutt, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Having Jabba there, but he's not a big thing. All the rest of it, but I think for the good fan service that Phantom Menace did, Attack of the Clones has bad fan service because that doesn't need to be Boba Fett's dad. It doesn't it just literally feels like Lucas is going, well, people liked Boba Fett. Let's put some Boba Fett in the movie. But it's a prequel, George, set ages ago. Oh, all right, then fine. Boba Fett's dad?
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because so apparently in the press for episode 1, they had announced there were going to be it was a new trilogy, so we knew there were more movies. And he'd said apparently in the press, Boba Fett plays a big part in episode 2. As like a tease for the fans, because Boba Fett is one of those really bizarre scenarios where he's barely in the original trilogy. Yeah, everyone fucking just loved him. I'll never understand it. It's a cool design, but I was never deeply invested in the character of the guy that dies because someone bumps into his jetpack and he flies into the space vagina and gets eaten. That's not the most compelling character to me. cool outfit and all. I just wasn't that compelled by Boba Fett as a kid. But fine, everyone loved the character. George wanted to keep the character and do something with the character. No problem. But apparently his original plan was that there was going to be some sort of attack on Coruscant led by the Separatists that was going to be the climax of this movie. And it was going to be led by a bunch of mercenaries as well as fringe units like the Trade Federation and other stuff. And Boba Fett was going to be one of the sort of mercenaries that did it. Not Jango Fett, Boba Fett. And I guess at some point that plan just changed in general. And then also logic kicked in of the dates. And he went, oh yeah, like he wouldn't, he'd have to be younger. And he's adjusted course. But because I guess he'd promised to keep Boba Fett, because he'd said Boba Fett was a key player in the movie, I guess he felt the need to continue that and keep that character. Yeah. I don't know. I don't mind the use of Jango and Boba Fett in this. They fit their place in the story, and I kind of think it's fun that the clone troopers are all clones of Jango Fett, and they've all got his voice, and the armor they wear that ultimately becomes the stormtrooper armor kind of is Mandalorian armor in visual, but obviously not made of Beskar armor, so it's like Beskar, so it's cheaper, like crappier armor, but it's kind of vaguely designed on the aesthetics of the Mandalorian. Like that's not bad. That's not a bad idea. It just doesn't really come to, it doesn't amount to anything in the movie.
Doesn't he also? I meant to look out for it, but I didn't see it.
Yep.
But I just know this from lore. Mm-hmm. Isn't there also a bit where Jango bangs his head because in the original trilogy, a mistake was left in where a stormtrooper banged their head? So the notion is that genetically, the stormtroopers are likely to bang their head because Jango does.
Well. Okay, so yes, that's exactly correct. But what's funny about that is modern day lore. It's unclear at what point the Empire switched from clones to cadets that they raised themselves. Because in Star Wars Rebels, they're raising stormtroopers from just random kids. They're not clones. Clones are decommissioned pretty quickly. So actually, that doesn't even work now. Because the stormtroopers aren't supposed to be the clones anymore. Because the whole plot of the Bad Batch is about the decommissioning of the clone troopers, and the Rebels show very much shows the academy that trains stormtroopers from kids that are that they've acquired. So yeah, but you're right. That's exactly right. So in the original trilogy, there's a stormtrooper that bumps his head as he's going through a doorway. He's a bit too tall for the doorway, and he clonks his head. And for some reason, it got missed, and it got noticed years later, like the kid from Back to the Future, sort of doing that weird hand gesture and pointing at his penis. It was one of those things that didn't get noticed until years later, and then George, I guess. I think he wanted to edit it out in one of the special editions, and maybe even he did. But then, yeah, he had a little nod to it here where he had Jango bump his head, the idea being that then went into the DNA of the Stormtroopers. But that's also now been undone because Star Wars canon is a mess. So, yeah, you're right, though. And it does show a lot of, George Lucas being I don't know. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a subtle one as fan service goes, but it doesn't really do anything for the movie, does it?
Oh, I like it. It's the highlight of the movie for me. I think I think it's brilliant.
Well, let's briefly talk about the action, because that is one of the big action set pieces of this movie, is Jango Fett Obi-Wan. It's 2 minutes long. I didn't care for it. It's kind of interesting to see somebody who has equipment to counter Jedi powers. It's not the most exciting fight in the world, is it?
No, I quite liked the Electro Amazing Spider-Man 2 style room laser things during the chase. I thought that was quite amusing.
Oh yeah, that's kind of good. That's kind of fun.
Yeah, I thought it's probably. Is there a better action sequence in the movie though? The chase at the beginning is just too cartoony and weird. You got fucking Jedis jumping out of cars and all that sort of shit. Yeah. It just logically doesn't seem to make much sense. The factory stuff at the end is very, very cartoonish. I don't know. I can't. The Count Dooku fight is just all right. Obi-Wan done. Anakin done. Yoda puts, well, you choose Yoda and then he runs away. The end is quite clever, and maybe, the stuff with when Anakin's got both lightsabers, that's cool. We'll talk about Yoda as its own thing in a second.
Mm-hmm.
But, there are elements of that are also cartoonish. So, yeah, it's not the most exciting thing, but it's probably my favourite, Django versus Obi-Wan is probably, because I like, the rain. I think the original, the starting setting is quite cool.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the stuff, the Obi-Wan using intelligence to get out of it rather than fighting, going, right, okay, I'm just going to make it look like I've died, and he's resting there, and then goes off. I think that feels very Obi-Wan.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think it's no. Is it any good? No, but it's probably my favourite action sequence in the movie.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought that, because I was thinking, I think if someone said what's the best action sequence in the movie, I guess Anakin and Obi-Wan versus Dooku. The problem with that though is that about 6 seconds later, it's the absolute worst action sequence in the movie, which is Yoda versus Dooku, which is just an absolute embarrassment on all fronts, and we'll talk about that in a second. But Anakin and Obi-Wan versus Dooku, I do like that they make Dooku seem threatening here, in that our two heroes are pretty easily defeated. And partly, and this is fine, by the way, I know I said earlier, you don't have Anakin's dark side show up until the third movie in an ideal world, because I think you can do a nice plucky hero. He can still be arrogant in this movie, and have Obi-Wan be like, that arrogant streak he's got is going to be a problem. That's fine. So he could still, because the reason they don't defeat Dooku is because Obi-Wan's like, let's work together, and Anakin's like, nah, I got it, and he runs in. That's storytelling. That's character stuff. He's physically made a choice that tells me something about his character. So there's an action scene happening, and I'm learning about the people. And then Obi-Wan and Dooku fight, and we learn a little bit about them as they exchange words while they exchange blades. And then we have that moment when Anakin sort of picks himself back up. He really needlessly slashes the cable on the floor so the lights start flickering and going out, which gives us a cool visual, but it's also like Anakin just wanted to fight during a rave, I guess. I don't really know why he did that. He just really felt the need. But again, that's that's a nitpick, and it's not really, who cares, because it looks cool, and it does look cool. One of the coolest things is that sort of quite dark corner of that hangar him and Dooku are fighting in, and it's just the light from the blades, which is really neat. It's a good visual. And then so for me, that's probably my favorite action sequence of the movie, because at least it's doing something a little bit character-wise, with Anakin showing his arrogant streak, and that's why they're defeated, and it kind of makes Dooku look threatening. But then, let's talk about Yoda.
Well, actually, can I just quickly, because I'm worried I'll forget this. There's no way we're going to forget to talk about Yoda. Isn't it funny that in naming a load of action sequence, neither of us have named Jedi's v droids, which is should be the big. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The big crescendo action sequence.
The big explosion fest. Yeah, I've seen fireworks.
It's just a lot of
more
lights and noises, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. It's
sorry?
It's the equivalent. I've seen fireworks more exciting. I think it is the equivalent of dangling keys in front of an audience and going, "Look, shiny." It has no storytelling tension of any kind. It has no. There's no. It is just a lot of lights and sounds, and I'm not invested in any particular group winning, because there isn't really a goal, or they're just going to hit each other for a bit. I guess the goal in the sense of the wider goal of okay, I sat down once when I was studying screenwriting with my screenwriting tutor, and he read a script of mine, a really early script of mine that was bad, and he correctly said, "But what does the character want?" And I said, "Well, he wants to be happy." And he went, "No, that is a thing a person would want. But in the course of your plot, what does he actually want in the plot of this, 30-minute piece?" And it really made me go, "Oh, fuck, yeah, he doesn't want... I haven't given him a story." And I was... In the context of this, I can imagine George Lucas going into that same tutor. First of all, I just... I got my... Actually, hi, Phil, if you're listening. Big Star Wars fan, aren't you? You never know. My former tutor, Phil,
I tell you.
nailed this. Love Phil.
Quick side story, mate. We recently had Loft Fest, which was where we went to my mum and dad's and cleared out their loft, and a lot of my uni stuff was there. Let me tell you, mate, I was average at best at uni. Like, I was picking up all these things. It's just like things like, what are the feedback like? The script. I held up the script, and someone has just crossed out the title and written unimaginative. What you're describing, I was reading on every single scripted assignment I ever did. One of the pieces of feedback for an assignment began, "I'm not sure you understood the question, Christopher."
That's brilliant. I think, but I imagine George Lucas sitting in front of Phil with this script, and Phil just being like, "Yeah, but what do the Jedi want? Well, to win. Yeah, obviously, yeah, they want to win. But for this story to function, they should have probably something a bit more tangible than just succeeding. Because what are they succeeding at? Oh, fighting. Yeah, I know what you're saying, George. I do." Beat the bad guys. No, I get you. I do. I get you. I see what you're saying, but just practically speaking, what are the audience investing in just beyond good guy win in this moment? Yeah. And the answer is fuck all. It is just lights and colors. And I really, really strongly believe that, like, this script without his name on it would get laughed out of any production meeting. It is broken beyond belief. Like, we need a clear protagonist with goals, and ideally a clear antagonist with goals, really, to make a story function. This is just a sequence of events, and a not particularly engaging sequence of events as well. All right, let's talk about Yoda. I remember watching the documentary as a kid, because I hated this scene as a kid. I was so excited at the prospect of seeing Yoda fight, and then when it happened, I was disappointed isn't even the word. And I was watching the documentary when the DVD came out of the making of the movie, and they're like talking about doing Yoda, and one of the guys, I can't remember if it's like a producer or if it's someone who actually worked on the visual effect of Yoda, and he goes, "Well, we got to be really careful, because if we get this wrong, it's just going to look really silly." And I died. Like, even as a kid, like, with, at probably the age of, at best, 15, probably 16, like, even at that age, had enough sense of irony to be like, that is the funniest shit you could have said in regards to this scene. Because let me tell you, it does look really fucking silly. And I think what really harms it, for me, is that he hobbles in with a walking stick before doing all the backflips and all the spins, and then hobbles out of the scene using a walking stick. And I'm sorry, no. Why couldn't he have fought slowly but methodically? Why did he have to suddenly become a bouncy little ball of flubber? What happened? Why can't he move more? He can just switch that on, can he, when he needs it? Brilliant. The rest of the time he needs a stick for balance. You're telling me the guy that did all those backflips and twirls needs a walking stick for balance? Cool. Fucking dumb. It looks bad. Fucking poor Christopher Lee doesn't know what he's doing. He's not sure what he's fighting against. They just told him to swing at the air, I guess. It's dreadful on every level, and it really fucking harms the movie.
It's fun. I quite like it.
I can't decide if you're fucking with me.
Well, no, everything you've just said is true, but I enjoy watching it because it's just so ridiculous. And I like the idea, I like the shot, where where he's like, I guess we're gonna settle this with lightsabers,
right?
Like, Yoda sort of poises, and you're just watching it going, what the fuck? And yeah, it does look ridiculous, but also cementing Yoda as no, he really was. He could kick ass. I think if it's not there, you got to take away years of seeing it and knowing it's a bit shit and all the stuff you've just said, and you got to know that if it wasn't there, if we didn't get to see Yoda kick ass, part of you would be like, I wish we got to see what Yoda looked like with a lightsaber. And we did.
Yeah.
Fucking stupid is the answer, but still.
Yeah, but stupid executed like this. I don't mind. If you said to me we're going to do Yoda with a lightsaber, that isn't inherently the problem. Fine, let's do that then. But, like, you've got to... If you're going to give me a version of Yoda that's walking around with a walking stick, then he needs to fight. Wouldn't it have been more interesting if he'd have been quite restricted in where he could stand and he wasn't bouncing around, but he was still so quick with his hands that his lightsaber was deflecting everything coming at him?
Yeah, that would have been great, yeah.
Or the opposite thing, where this young Yoda, who we've mostly just seen sitting down and thinking, so we've not needed to see him, when he entered that room, didn't enter with a walking stick, but stood tall, walking strongly, ready for action. Like, and therefore you just go, oh, it's just he has got mobility. We've just only ever seen him meditating, pondering in the Jedi Council room. And here he is being the walking stick thing is a thing from Empire. A few years from now. He's actually still very mobile. Then you can have him bouncing around. And I still think it would look a bit silly because the special effects aren't great. But at least I would go, well, that kind of functions. But I genuinely think the actual answer would have been to just have him fight in a really interesting, methodical, slow way where he's just shuffling around, but his lightsaber is still where it needs to be to block all of these quick shots coming at him.
Yeah, because to be fair, him blocking the lightning thing and just like absorbing it into a ball, that looks cool. Mm-hmm. Like that works.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, there's a story apparently that the original script just had Yoda and Dooku just immediately whip out lightsabers and fight, and it was one of the production or special effects guys pitched, well, isn't he supposed to be like Master of the Force? Wouldn't it be cool? If you've got two space wizards, why don't they do space wizard stuff at each other for instead? And Lucas was like, yeah, but people want to see Yoda fight, so we'll do both. And that's why the scene starts with they added Yoda and Dooku, firing stuff at each other for a minute first to sort of to assuage that. But again, a full Force-based battle would have also been kind of cool because that part works really well. I just think play into the fact that he's old. Don't just ignore it. Like I can't get over what a stupid decision that is. Dear Lord. Yeah. All right.
I've just realised it comes after also our three heroes fighting some CGI monsters, which in a way we haven't talked about, but I feel like everything we've already said about the action scenes not having stakes and the CGI being a bit of a mess applies to that scene.
I mean, at least with that, they're tied up and they have to have creative solutions to getting out of their situations. I think that scene is more passable than what follows it, if I'm being honest, in terms of the big explosions everywhere. Cool
and I feel like they all get out of it in very them ways. Mm-hmm. Like, you know what I mean? The way Obi uses them to break the handcuff. No, he doesn't break that, but break free. Basically uses their strength against them. Anakin's is quite raw and he's jumping on the beast and like all of that stuff. And Padme's is quite tactical and quite clever. Mm-hmm. I will say that Natalie Portman really is doing her best. Yeah. Like you get some semblance of like, oh, I can see how this character is both the queen and falling in love and also a bit of a badass and all of that stuff. And it mainly comes from Natalie Portman's charm.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, 100%. 100% agree.
Speaking of actresses, did you... When watching this movie, at the beginning, did you also have to pause, get out your phone, and check whether it was Rosebud?
No, but I did wonder if it was
did
Rose
you just-
Byrne. Is it Rose Byrne? It looks like Rose Byrne.
It is Rose Byrne. Yeah.
Brilliant. I know. You know what? It's funny. I nearly paused it, but I was like, I can't. If I pause every time I see an actor I think I recognise, I'm never going to get through this movie. It was a slog enough as it was. But I was very tempted to pause and check. No, so it is Rose Byrne. You confirmed.
It is Rose Byrne.
Brilliant.
Yeah. And I didn't watch it, but I saw a video headlined. Even Rose Byrne didn't realise she was in Star Wars, so at some point I might dig that out.
That's funny.
I imagine that's quite funny.
Yeah. All right. Let's. Oh God. So yeah, I don't think that fight scene's too bad. The arena fight scene before everyone shows up and it just becomes explosions. Don't you like explosions? I don't love it, but I don't hate it. Like it's good enough. Like that's fine. That's a perfectly passable action scene that tells us something about the characters and blah blah blah. So that's okay. It's very lucky those Jedi that show up with the troopers. Oh no, they're not with the troopers. The first group of Jedi that just show up to save the day. It's good, lucky they brought spare lightsabers for Anakin and Obi-Wan, isn't it?
Yeah, I didn't remember that as well. This sort of subplot of Anakin always losing a lightsaber. It's like, okay, fine.
Oh yeah.
Sort of takes away the reverence slightly.
Yeah.
Of the lightsaber later. But
yeah, it does. It absolutely does. Well, we'll have to talk about that next week because Anakin's like, I hate you. I hate you. Obi-Wan's picking up that lightsaber, and then you cut to him saying to Luke, your father wanted you to have it someday when you were old enough. Because there's a little bit of that doesn't quite. Those two scenes don't fit as the way you think they do. But anyway, the comic relief in this movie with C-3PO is dreadful. I don't know. I am not an arbiter of what kids find funny, but I'll tell you right now that it isn't puns. Like Jar Jar being like "Piusa" because a thing farted will have made more children laugh than C-3PO saying it was such a drag when he was being dragged on the ground, and then saying, I'm quite beside myself when his head is beside his body. That is not... I mean, who fucking thought that was worth putting in the script?
And those two, at that point, out loud, when watching it, I just went, oh no. Because they're really close to... They happen, like, one after the other as well. Yeah. Like, it's really bad.
Yeah, they're literally like a minute apart from each other. I've written down some random quotes from the movie. Let's have a look at if any of these are any good. I've been dying a bit each day since you came back into my life. Is a hell of a line. Oh no! Oh, Padme says that. Padme says this is towards the end of the movie. Padme says, "I've been dying a bit each day since you came back into my life," and he's all like, "What are you talking about?" I think it's pretty clear what she's talking about, mate. Then she's like, I love you. And he replies, you love me? Like it's a question. Like he's not just spent the entire movie obsessed with her. What the fuck is happening? Who wrote this dialogue?
I know.
Oh, God.
How bad does that reflect on him? Because, like you say, he spent the whole movie wanting them to be together. Is it just because he wants her? Like, do you know what I mean? Yeah. That reaction of, you love me? It's like, oh, I didn't realise there was any indication that you might be into this. It's like he hadn't even considered that.
Yeah. So fucking weird.
Which is just icky.
I'll tell you a thing I did like, actually. I thought of a thing I liked, Chris. Would you like to hear a thing I liked? Padme is the one that chooses to go defy the Jedi and save Obi-Wan. She's like, well, you've been ordered to protect me, and I'm going to save Obi-Wan, so I guess you're coming with me to save Obi-Wan. That's a good moment. I like that she has some agency there because let me tell you, very rare in this movie any of these characters have agency. They're all just sort of being pulled along by a guy wearing a big board that says the plot, and he's hooked them all with a fishing rod and just keeps pulling them into scenes. But that's one time when a character makes an actual choice, and I liked it.
Other than being connected to the appalling love story, I think Padme and Natalie Portman might be the highlight of this movie, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Yeah. One other thing and this is kind of a nitpick, but it's like just a logic hole. So the whole premise of this movie, right, is that Palpatine is behind both sides of this war. And he's created a conflict so that he'll get voted these extra powers so he becomes emperor, right? That's the plan, right? And they need someone to suggest this, because they're like, oh, we definitely need to use this army, but we can't do it without the approval of the Senate. The only way we're going to be able to do it, because we're never going to get everyone to agree, is if I become a dictator. Oh, and then he says, if only Senator Amidala were here. And Jar Jar's like, oh, she'd agree to this, would she? Well, I'll do it then. I'll be the good guy. Except the entire reason Padme was ever even in Coruscant at the beginning of the movie was to oppose the army. And I know Jar Jar is stupid, right? And I know that's a part of his character, right? I do understand that. But there's stupid and there's not knowing literally the one thing that the person that you're replacing, like the one person you're standing in as a proxy for, believed. Like, why would Jar Jar agree to that when he must know the one thing Padme didn't want was for the Republic to get an army?
Yeah, it's bad. Yeah, like it's bad writing. But let's not forget, Dan.
Yep.
This is a movie where an animal claws and rips the back of someone's t-shirt and the front of it falls off. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
With no visible scars on the front. So somehow, pulling at the back.
Look, the claw caught a thread, Chris. And when the claw came away, it pulled at the thread and it just went right around and just undid the entire, perfectly, like, just the entire bottom, just so we can see midriff.
Yeah. It's just ridiculous. There's so many logic holes in this movie, and Jar Jar is a good example of that.
Yeah. And for people who are usually listening to this podcast, go, well, you haven't talked about character arcs yet, and you usually do. That character arcs are usually a big part of the discussion of this podcast. I'll tell you the reason why. There aren't any. No one grows. No one learns anything. Nothing. Sorry. There aren't any. No one is on a journey in this movie of any kind. I mean, I think that was also kind of a problem in Phantom Menace, but I think that's more obvious here and more of a problem here.
Well, the attempted journey is Anakin and Padme, but it's just appalling. it's just awful.
But what's the journey? So the start of the movie, he still likes her, and she admits later in the movie that she still likes him, and then they marry.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So in this scenario, you're Phil, and I'm George Lucas.
But what's the arc, George?
They get together.
Cool. Okay. Great. And I mean, and I think someone who's defending the movie would go, well, it's not just that they're getting together. It's him. That's him choosing to finally ignore the Jedi. This is the guy that wouldn't go after Obi-Wan because, the Jedi told him to stay put, right? So this is him breaking his Jedi vows to have attachment, to be married to a person. And I would say to that person, have you seen the fucking movie? He's ignoring the Jedi left, right, and fucking center in this movie. In fact, it was kind of weird he didn't immediately go to save Obi-Wan after they told him to on Tatooine. Because the rest of this movie, he just keeps bending his instructions to mean whatever he wants it to mean. Like, there's a bit early in the movie when they're like, your instructions are to just guard Padme. And he's like, well, we're Jedi. Investigation is implied. Like, he just fucking politics his way around all of the rules. So I don't want to hear that him choosing to marry her at the end is like a big deal, because it's not. He threw all the Jedi teachings away at every opportunity in this movie.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. Sorry, 1 second. Jess brought me a cup of tea. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jess.
Dan says thanks. Can we also talk about, I think it may be the dullest, I've got it here, I'm going to read it out. I think it might be the dullest scroll in a Star Wars movie ever. How is this setting us up for a big adventure movie? Right, here we go. There is unrest in the Galactic Senate. Several hundred solar systems under the leadership of the rebel leader, Count Dooku, have declared their intentions to secrete from the Republic. This separatist movement has made it difficult for the limited number of Jedi Knights to maintain peace and order in the galaxy. Senator Armadillo... Senator Armadillo. Senator Armadillo, the former queen of Naboo, is returning to Coruscant to vote on the critical issue of creating an army to assist the overwhelmed Jedi. Like, it's just dull.
That is fucking...
It's just really dull.
That is very dull. Also, if we're doing... Can I just keep on my little nitpick train? Because I'm just remembering bits and bobs. It's a trap, right, at the beginning. They say it. Like, she goes to sleep and she's using herself as bait to help catch her killer, right? And Obi-Wan goes, "You're using her as bait." And Anakin goes, "Oh, yeah, it was her idea," right? That happens, yeah, in the movie. I've not misremembered that scene. That's what happens, yeah?
No, that's what happens.
Yeah, so about 30 seconds earlier, he explains that she covered the cameras. If the plan... It's for her
Very
to just...
specifically because she was uncomfortable with him watching, by the way, which is, add that to the list of flags.
Yeah, add that to the list earlier. But wait a minute. I'm sorry. If the plan is to be bait, you would definitely let him look at the cameras because that's the plan, right?
Yeah.
She's like, "I'll be bait, but also you can't watch." What? I'll be bait, but you can't keep an eye on me.
Also, hold on. Let me see if I can find the script here. Hold on.
Oh, it's bad.
Oh yeah, here we go. Here we go. When the decor dies, I'm sorry, I'm a lady. I'm not sure. No. I should not have come back. Right, milady, you are still in danger. She says nothing. She's just staring at the body. Right. I don't mean to be a dick, but she was a decoy. I'm not being like you can't be like the woman you dressed up in case you were killed gets killed. You can't just be like,
but also,
what the fuck?
From Rose Byrne's perspective, what does she mean by "I failed you"? It should have been "I succeeded, I protected you." Like it should failed you. How did she? You did exactly the job you were supposed to. No.
Yeah. Although that's not Rose Byrne. Rose Byrne's still alive. Rose Byrne's not the decoy. But
is Rose Byrne not the decoy? I can't remember. I remember seeing Rose Byrne's face. Anyway, also, if we're just pulling up dialogue to make fun of, you've grown, so have you. Grown more beautiful, I mean. That's another red flag right there. Add that to the list, please. That is, if the word "ick" had been popularized at the time of this movie, that is the word to describe almost anything Anakin says at any point. Actually, we haven't told the story. Very quickly, I will genuinely say, right, this is one of the most clear moments in my life when I saw a movie and knew I was hating it midway through. And I've told this story before, and I sort of did it as a joke to myself, but I genuinely did it. About an hour into the movie, when Padme and Anakin are rolling in the fields, I genuinely took my ticket out of my pocket and looked down and read Star Wars Attack of the Clones and then looked back up at the screen.
I'm not worried about the notion of Star Wars doing something different. Like, I think that's fine. It's got to be done well.
Right. It's just not entertaining. It's really bad. Anyway, also, and this is just a nitpick, in the next movie they have luggage that follows them around, like little droid luggage, and in this movie they're lugging around luggage by hand. And I just want to say, if you've got access to the luggage that moves automatically, then what the fuck are you doing carrying your own bags? That's all I'm saying. I guess they're supposed to be travelling as refugees, and maybe the refugees don't have access to the droid bags. Maybe that's the answer. Anyway, I wrote in my notes, Anakin is a terrible Jedi. I don't know why Obi-Wan puts up with him. I don't even know which scene that's in reference to.
There are many that could be a reference to.
Yeah. I know I did. I clarified it underneath. He clearly loves Padme when he's supposed to not have romantic feelings and attachments. He's arrogant about the Jedi's place in this. He adjusts perspectives to fit his own mandate. He uses Padme as bait, and he constantly dreams of his mother, even though he's supposed to be focused on the present.
And he loses his lightsaber all the time.
And let me add that to the list. And he loses his fucking lightsaber all the time. I do like they set up Anakin and Palpatine's relationship quite early. They have a scene here that feeds really into the next movie, where he's like, "I think you may become one of the most powerful of all the Jedi, even more powerful than Master Yoda." It's a good scene, sets up the dynamic. I like it. He's sucking up to him already. He's like, "You're great as a Jedi," He's like, and then later on we have a scene where Anakin's like, "Oh, I think Palpatine's all right," and you're like, "Oh, the naivety of a child." Like the guy gave him a compliment, so now he thinks he's a good man. But that is that's fine. That works.
Yeah, I like that. And if we're doing compliments, I think C-3PO and R2-D2's scenes are fun. Like they're harmless fun, but fun.
Well, except for the stupid puns in the last scene.
Yeah. Well, no, I quite like them.
Fair enough.
You gotta find joy where you can.
I did write in my notes, Obi-Wan and Anakin have a dynamic that's sort of fun, but it's never enough to make up for the bland, overly long, tensionless action sequences. Wow. I was aiming to kill in these notes, it turns out.
It's a bad movie.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I wrote down as well how, in the last movie, the Jedi didn't want to train Anakin. They were like, "I don't know about this prophecy. This kid doesn't seem, shouldn't be trained." And then Obi-Wan comes to them in this movie, and he's like, "I'm not sure about Anakin. I'm worried about him. He's arrogant, and he has all these tendencies that I'm not sure are great." And they're like, "Yeah, but he's the one destined to bring balance to the Force." I'm like, wait a fucking minute. You guys didn't fucking believe this shit 2 years ago or whatever, 10 years ago. What's happened?
I was going to say, I genuinely think it's one of the worst movies that we've reviewed on this podcast. Not just, not just Star Wars. It's one of the... Because you notice, usually, with a bad movie, we're going, if they just did this, or maybe if they made it this, or maybe if they tweaked it to this, or if it was this. We haven't done that this week, because the roots of the flaws in this movie are so embedded into everything that you just go, well, if they tore the whole thing up and started again, I'm sure it would be okay. It's so at its core flawed, this movie, by a bad script, a lack of a plot, the dialogue, all of it. You just can't. It's not like if you tightened the dialogue, it would be a good movie, because it would still not have a decent plot. And it's not like if you tightened. Well, the only way of tightening the plot is to change the plot. So yeah, it's. I don't really recommend it, Dan, if I'm honest.
No, absolutely not. This is not worth watching at all. This is by far the worst Star Wars movie, and by far one of the worst movies, if not the worst movie we've covered on this podcast by some way.
Yeah. Did you have any other notes before we?
Yeah, I've got a handful. Just a couple of tiny ones. And some of these are positives, but just tiny ones that aren't enough to make up for the mess that the movie is. Who doesn't like the sound the seismic charges make? Because let me tell you, you find me a person that doesn't like that noise, I'm gonna call him a liar. That's so cool. That's just, it's like that weird absence of noise, and then the as it spreads out. Love it every time. Don't know why.
That was cool.
That was cool. I enjoy the scene when Obi-Wan goes in to the Yoda and the younglings, and Obi-Wan lost a planet he has. Oh, how embarrassing! That's pretty fun. I'm on board with that scene. Although Obi-Wan says, even that scene I had to find a flaw in. Obi-Wan says the planet should be here, and all the planets around it are rotating as if to this gravitational pull, but the planet's not there. The only conclusion you could come to, Obi-Wan, is that the planet has been removed from the records. I don't know why a child needs to be the one to say that. If you rewrite the scene so it's the kid that notices the gravity well is still present, not Obi-Wan, and just, I needed another perspective on this to help make it make sense. Instead, Obi-Wan comes in with the answer basically there and still bothers to go in and has a kid say, "I'm fucking dumb." Anyway, whatever. It's just bad dialogue. Anakin twisting the Jedi teachings to make loving Padme okay. There's that whole speech he gives that he concludes. So in a way, you could say we're encouraged to love. I don't mind that. I think that's fun. I think that shows him justifying his behaviors in his own head. So that's pretty cool. But again, it does take something away from his choice to marry at the end. If he'd been a really staunch Jedi the whole way through the movie that was following all the rules the whole time, even if he was still a bit arrogant, but he was like genuinely like following the teachings properly, and then at the end of the movie he marries her, that's a shift for that character. That's a character arc. That's someone who's been changed by the events of the movie. But he does it the whole way through the movie, so it's nothing. I like the scene where Obi-Wan and Jango meet. It's kind of a little, you know, before they fight, when they're in the room, and he's like, been to Coruscant recently? And he's all like, maybe. You know, like that scene. It's a fun little scene. It's about as subtle as a punch in the face, but it's a fun little scene. I don't mind that scene. It's kind of goofy, but it's okay. Let's see. Oh yeah, there's an amazing sequence that makes no sense time-wise. So there's a weird timing thing. So Obi-Wan is out in the rain on his communicator talking to the Jedi Council, and he says he thinks Jango is something to do with whatever's going on. And the Jedi Council are like, oh, you better go catch him before he leaves then. And we'd seen him packing his stuff. He was heading out the door, right? So Obi-Wan's like, right, I'm going to go get Jango. And then he goes off. And then we cut to Naboo, where Anakin is like in the middle of the night tossing and turning, having the dreams. Then we cut to the next morning. So like 6 hours have passed, maybe only 4 or 5, but multiple hours have passed. And Padme's like, oh, you're dreaming about your mother, we should go save her or whatever. And then we cut back to Obi-Wan, who appears to have just hung up the call with the council and caught up with Jango. And then the fight happens. And I'm like, wait a minute. Why have we edited it like this?
On Anakin's mother,
yes.
How insane is it that she's just genuinely been captured by Tusken Raiders, as opposed to it being part of like the wider plan?
Let me tell you, mate, you are onto something. Wait till we get to Triv. Hold that thought. There's a piece of Triv that's going to cover that. You are not wrong. Honestly, Chris, genuinely, you know, you say a lot of smart things in this podcast. I wouldn't do it with you if I didn't find your thoughts on these things very interesting and engaging. But genuinely, that is so obscenely astute. I'm starting to suspect you've read ahead on the trivia. But we'll come back to it.
I haven't. No. I genuinely, it's just I was watching it expecting, I was like, well, this is going to be connected, isn't it? And then when it wasn't, I was like, oh, okay, fine, I guess.
You're a smart man, Chris. We'll come back to that. Anything else? What I was in the movie, he's still a shitbag. That's fun. I do kind of like that Owen Lars witnesses Anakin's dark side so clearly here, because it gives new context to that line from A New Hope where he says, you know, he's too much of his father in him. That's what I'm afraid of. You know, that's a cool moment.
I will say going back one, what's his name? What's the character's
Watto.
name?
Yeah.
Watto. I will say, though, it was oddly nuanced for a film with no subtlety at all. The sort of, the pleased to see him, but also slightly ashamed to see him, and then excited to know that he's a Jedi, and like that kind of, like the way he opens his arms and he almost doesn't know whether to hug him, and that sort of weird dynamic of having a nostalgia for each other, even though one of them owned the other one as a slave. This sort of weird power shift and dynamic. I actually think that scene is played very well.
I agree. I 100% agree. And a lot of that comes, I think, to maybe the subtlety of the voice actor, you know, that he gave to his performance. And then the animators will have taken his lead. You know, he's Annie. You know, he's excited. They animate him that way. Oh, you know, and then he goes down, and then they follow that too. But still, like it's you're right. It's in a movie with no subtlety. It's quite nuanced. You're right, because it is. You know, I was your owner, and that's not cool. But also, you know, I love the little kid. You know, I was like a father figure to him in some ways. So like, there's a lot going on in that scene. I agree with you. Tick. That scene gets a tick. What else? Oh, John Williams. Like, John Williams is on fire. I don't know if we talked about John Williams' score from the previous movie enough, but let me tell you, John Williams is absolutely killing it across the prequel trilogy. All of the music is utterly fantastic, and particularly when Anakin gives the I hate them rant in this movie. You know, I killed them, the children and women too, all that stuff. the way it's not subtle, but the movie isn't subtle, so it's fine. The Imperial March creeps in under the existing song. Oh, beautiful. Yes, please. It's great.
Yeah, it's very good.
Yeah. Oh, I did write the factory sequence may have been fun when I was a kid, but honestly, it's just tedious now, full of bad comedy and no tension. Yeah, that's true. It's true. It's like watching a video game cutscene, but without getting to actually play it. So I don't even get the joy of being in control of what's happening. The Trade Federation robots are fucking useless. George knows that, but it worked okay in the Phantom Menace because they were facing Jar Jar. But not here. That's why they've added extra different types of droids, which is probably a smart choice. Because there's a really great scene in a documentary from the Phantom Menace where George Lucas is showing a prop of one of the physical Trade Federation droids, the Raja type, to Steven Spielberg. And he even says, the Jedi cut through these guys like butter. They're actually kind of useless. I'm like, George, it's supposed to be the threat. And he sort of says it like he's laughing, like that's kind of the joke. But like, George, mate, come on. But it's fine. They kind of solved it here with those big triangle-shaped robots that seem a lot more threatening and don't seem to fall over as easily. So fine, whatever. They kind of figured that out here. I wrote down one of my favorite lines in the movie. Then we decided to rescue you. He looks up at the chains. Good job. That's a great moment. Very funny. You all right, buddy? I think I lost Chris.
Yeah.
Okay.
No. I'm just listening. It's so bamboozling. This film, it's just mad.
No,
and
so
I was thinking, I was distracted because I was thinking
silent on my headphones end, so I was worried we got cut off.
No. I was thinking about the. I was trying to think what was the most. I was thinking about the point about your point about it being a video game that you can't play, and I was trying to think what sequence is most like that.
Yeah.
And I think it's either the factory stuff,
yes,
or it's the chase, isn't it? It's probably the chase, to be fair.
Yeah.
But the scene that feels most like a cutaway is I think it is. It feels like a cutaway scene in a video game is Obi-Wan talking to the guy at the cafe. Like, that really does feel like...
He's the guy that's giving you the mission.
Like a game.
Like you've travelled over to the diner, you've stepped on a glowing circle, it goes dark for a second, then it fades in on Obi-Wan coming, it's Obi! And the scene starts.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it really does. But I think the chase is probably the most video game. Do you? Yeah. That's what. So I was just thinking about that. Apologies.
No, it's fine. I agree. But because it was. I don't think you. Does that? The line. The we decided to rescue you. Looks up at the chains. Good job. I just want to. That's the line that I was like pulling out because I just think that's very funny. And I think it's not a great line on paper, but I think Ewan McGregor makes that line very funny in his delivery. What else? I don't mind seeing the Jedi fight in big numbers or even seeing the start of the Clone Wars, but it's just kind of a meaningless thing. The film moved the pieces around until it happened. We talked about that earlier in the movie. It's like you have to make that meaningful. You can't just do it. Okay, we're very, very... Last little note I wanted to ask you about, Chris, I think. I think so. Death Star plans. Little hint that they've got some Death Star plans. That's what Dooku is escaping with. How do we feel about referencing the Death Star again?
I feel like it slightly undermined the power of the ending of the next film.
Yes.
And I think, the plan all along to show the shell of the dead, like, that's a cool fucking shot, to my memory. We'll see next time how we feel about it. Uh-huh. But I was quite surprised to see them here. And I think, again, like we said throughout and just said, the film's got no fucking subtlety. So it's the fact that I think if it was just the first time you see them, and then they go and he's got them, great. But he gets handed. We see the Death Star plans. They get put into the device, the card, whatever.
Yeah, they get stored on a USB stick.
Yeah, essentially. The USB sticks
they get written to a CDR. It takes a minute. It's a floppy disk.
And the USB stick gets handed to Count Dooku, who randomly, despite the fact that they've just been up, goes, yeah, and clicks a button and looks at them again. And if it was just that first one, almost blink and you miss it.
Yeah,
and almost that sense of in the cinema going, is that Death Star plans? Ooh, ooh, ooh. But the fact that they just show them again, it's like, oh, we get it. And that's when I was like, oh, now you've ruined it for what it's going to be next week.
Yeah, agreed. 100% agreed. I don't mind the end note of this film. It's worth noting, by the way. You know, it sort of tries to echo Empire Strikes Back without really earning it across the movie, but it's still reasonably ominous to have Yoda be like, the shroud of the dark side has fallen, begun the Clone War has. You know, that's fine. And then ending on that shot of admin, the guy doing admin, Anakin and Padme, you know, stood looking out over the lake with C-3PO and R2-D2 next to them, which mirrors the shot from the end of Empire, where it's Luke and Leia looking out with, C-3PO and R2 on their right. You're echoing the shot, but you've not earned it because they're not. They haven't had the defeat the characters had in Empire Strikes Back. Luke had lost his hand. Han was frozen in carbonite. The Empire was crushing the rebellion. Like they'd had their base for everything was low. Everything was bad. You can't just do the mournful ending without really earning it. But you know, the music and the visuals are not terrible. It would function a lot better if the movie had earned it, but it is still there, and it kind of works, I guess. So, yeah.
It's weird to have that music, though, go over the wedding scenes, which should be happy. But if memory serves, doesn't the ominous music just continue over that?
Yeah, it does. Well, and I don't even mind that because, like, it is kind of ominous that he's marrying her. He shouldn't be marrying her. He's going against the Jedi doctrine. He's not making a wise choice. If you want, it's like the start of his, not the start, but a step on his journey. You know, Jedi aren't supposed to have attachment. He's marrying someone. Like, it's, it's supposed to be and that's the problem again with this premise of like it's a love story but also the story of someone's downfall to evil. It's like you can't really do both. This movie should have purely been the happy love story because then I would have felt more in the next movie when he turns to the dark side and it all falls apart. That would have been more powerful had I loved the character and found the character endearing and charming and to be a good guy here. You know what I mean? You set up a good guy, then you tear him down.
Yeah.
He's kind of been a dick from minute one in this movie. So, shocker. He turns into a bad guy later on. Does he? Yeah, all right. Do you know what I mean?
That makes sense.
Yeah, it would have been better if they'd have just let him be the hero of this movie first. But that's just my opinion. But overall thoughts very quickly before we get into trivia. Look, there's no main character. There's no main villain. No one grows. The characters just pulled through a really bizarre, then this happened plot that eventually sets up some things that fans have wanted to see for a while, but doesn't really earn them. George is the problem. The first movie was made with a nervous studio keeping him in check. Other writers and directors brought his ideas to the screen through their vision in the sequels. This is probably just what happens when no one says no to George. I mean, it had far too much CGI. I mean, Hayden Christensen said the entire shoot, there was only one set that he filmed on that didn't incorporate blue screen. This movie is a mess on all fronts. I know people have talked about doing edits of the prequel trilogies where it's one movie and they cut out Phantom Menace. I'm sorry, I'm cutting out this one. A couple of scenes you keep.
Yeah, I think. Yeah.
But Jeebus. Yeah. Oh, yeah, rough. Yep. All right. Is it time, Chris?
Completely agree. Even the love story, you'd go, if you cut out this one, you'd go, oh, they're together now, are they? Which is basically what you do in this movie anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed.
So it's redundant. Yes, it's time, Dan. I think it's you. What is it now? Yeah, it's 8:00. I can get away with it. Let's trim it up. I can't get away with it, Dan, because I haven't got the voice to do it. But still,
yeah, you've been dying across this podcast, and I feel bad that we're doing this with you being so ill. If I'd known you were this ill, I would have told you to just sleep in, and we'd have done this later at a later date. But you were already here.
Don't worry about it.
We figured it out.
I'm here now. It's happening.
Well, I'm gonna give you some trivia. So very quickly,
Apologies if one, we need to do it again. That was too broken up. Apologies if ill noises have been a pain for this podcast, either from editing or listening. Apologies for that.
Yeah, I'll try and cut some out, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to find them all across a 2.5-hour podcast or whatever. This is.
Which is so. Apologies.
Oh, no, wait, wow, we're only an hour. We're only an hour and 40 minutes in, Chris. Ooh, that's exciting.
Jeez. Well, let's wrap it up by let's triv it up.
I'm gonna give you some trivia. I don't know. This isn't. Why has that gone down there? Okay. So, after the mixed critical response, my notes are a mess. Sorry, I didn't explain what was happening there. I got to the top of the trivia, and there were just some random notes about the movie that weren't in my notes, but were instead built into my trivia, which is incorrect. One of them is just Count Dooku is apparently the main villain, but doesn't appear until an hour and 16 minutes into the film. My notes for this movie were quite sassy.
I'd love it if that was on IMDb. In fact, I think you should put it on IMDb right now.
It might be in there, to be honest with you. Right, maybe that's how it ended up in both. Right, after the mixed critical response to episode 1, George Lucas was hesitant to return to the writing desk for this movie. In March 2000, just 3 months before the start of principal photography, he finally completed the rough draft of this movie. He continued to iterate on his rough draft, producing a proper first and then second draft. For help with the third draft, which would later become the shooting script, he brought on someone called Jonathan Hales, who had written several episodes of Young Indiana Jones Chronicles for him, but had limited experience writing theatrical films. The final script was completed just 1 week before principal photography.
That's mad. Utter madness.
Yeah. Now, I want everyone to keep that. There's a reason that piece of trivia is absolutely up front, because if you keep that in mind through the rest of this trivia, a pattern will start to emerge about this movie. And things being done a bit on the fly and shifting as they went in a way that is not potentially great. So, with that in mind, Hugh Quarshie was originally slated to reprise his role as Captain Panaka from Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. So he was like the main guard from Naboo that hung around with the Queen. Had like the red hat. He turned down the role after Lucasfilm refused to let him read the whole script. Now, refused or didn't have one? I'll let you decide. As a result, he didn't want to do the movie, and he got written out and got replaced by a newly created chief of security in Captain Typho, portrayed by Jay Lagaya. I hope I'm pronouncing that guy's surname correctly. Who's good in the movie? He's perfectly, yeah, he fills that role very nicely. Sad for Hugh Quarshie, but, you know, it's a sensible choice to bow out of a movie where they're not giving you a script, to be honest. You're going to love this, Chris. This might be what I think genuinely might be your favorite piece of trivia of all time, right? Genuinely. I'm so excited for you to hear this. Mm-hmm. I'm going to list some people who were in the running for Anakin Skywalker, but I want you to keep your ears out for the last name, and you'll know it when you hear it. So, other actors that auditioned for the role of Anakin Skywalker included Ryan Philippe, Misha Collins, Paul Walker, Colin Hanks, Christian Bale, Heath Ledger, James Van Der Beek, Joshua Jackson, and even S Club 7's Paul Catamol.
Wow. That is amazing.
What?
Wow.
And I know S Club 7, for those who aren't familiar, where they were a musical act in the UK that also had like an accompanying TV show. So the S Club 7 members of this pop group were also actors. I do appreciate that. But I don't think they were leading a Star Wars movie level. And especially when you hear that name next to Misha Collins, Paul Walker, Colin Hanks, Christian Bale, Heath Ledger, James Van Der Beek, Josh Jackson. The next name, when you give me that list, should not be Paul Catamol.
Did you name Leo there? Because obviously Leo was the one I remember at the time.
Well,
the big...
He's the next bit. I put him in a separate bit because his one was an interesting one.
Right, okay.
We'll come back to him in a second. But when that's the list, Paul Catamol from S Club 7 was not the last name I was expected to see on it. So that really blew my mind.
No, I'd love to have seen it though.
Oh yeah. Oh god, if I could portal go into an alternate reality, see a Club 7 member in Star Wars, yes please. Absolutely.
Yeah,
any of them.
I'll tell you now, he probably would have done a comparable job to Hayden Christensen.
Yeah.
Who actually, like we say, gets a lot of bad rep unnecessarily, I feel. I think a big part of it is the script he's working with. Yeah. As proven by his other roles and his appearances in Obi-Wan and spoilers, Ahsoka. But yeah.
So, in the end, Hayden Christensen got the part, primarily because he and Natalie Portman, apparently, according to George Lucas, looked good together. Now, Leonardo DiCaprio was reportedly briefly considered, but the name went public very quickly, and it created such a negative fan response on the internet that it basically took him out of being a serious contender almost instantly. Obviously, he was a big name at the time, which is why the name leaked the second it was even uttered. But it's interesting that they were so burnt from fan response to Phantom Menace. They were just like, okay, fans, whatever you want. Because I feel like now they just go, I don't care what the fans are complaining about. If he's right for the role, we'll cast him.
Yeah, and I think he would have done a good job. But equally, I was one of those fans. I wasn't rallying about it on the internet, but when I heard about it, I was like, oh no, it shouldn't be Leo. Because for me, it was the association. Mm-hmm. I felt that like Anakin, it should be an unknown actor, which is quite wanky for 13 years old. But I genuinely remember going, Leo's too known for Titanic. Mm-hmm. It's got to be someone on their own. And also, Leo was not. You wouldn't look at Jack in Titanic and assume that character could go on to become Darth Vader. Now, obviously, that's a character, not the actor. Leo could have done it with his acting, but he was so. I mean, this was like a couple of years after Titanic, which was literally the biggest film of all time at that point. So disassociating him from Jack in order to believe him as Darth Vader, I think would have been a tall order. But I'm sure he doesn't mind now that he wasn't in it.
Well, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I think he probably does, because Leo is famously an absolutely massive Star Wars fan. There is a story, I do not know if this is real, but there is a story that he, on a date, booked out the cinema so him and his date could watch movies in private, then just made his date watch Star Wars movies while he ran around with a replica lightsaber making the noises. Now, if that's true, I think that does make me like him a little more. And I'm not a huge Leo DiCaprio fan as a person. But the other story that goes along with that is that apparently he absolutely forces anyone he's friends with to watch Star Wars stuff. He apparently berated Jonah Hill until Jonah Hill watched The Mandalorian. So Leo is a massive Star Wars fan.
Yeah, the cinema one, you're like, who knows if that's true? But the making people watch it one, Jonah Hill has talked about that. Yes. Jonah Hill has talked about Leo making him watch Star Wars. Yeah.
So I while I'm sure he's a bit like, well, my career's turned out great, I don't need to have done Star Wars. If you're that big of a fan, having been considered for a role and been the right age, and I think what's interesting about Leo is Leo at that age did look more like the older version of that child from Phantom Menace, I would say, visually. Not talking about the performance. You could believe Jake Lloyd into Leo, I think. They've got the same sort of round face shape that I can't describe it. In my head, it fits better. But I don't think I would actually change it to Leo, because I think Hayden did as good a job as anyone is going to do in this situation. So, yeah. It is what it is. And like Ewan McGregor in Star Wars, Hayden Christensen apparently got on the set and immediately started making lightsaber noises when he was handling one in the rehearsals, and had to be told, as did Ewan McGregor, that they had that in post. Stop it. It's one of my favourite pieces of trivia, and it just keeps coming back. Christopher Lee, who plays Count Dooku, was very good friends with Peter Cushing, who played Grand Moff Tarkin in the original Star Wars movies. Both have appeared together in many, many films back in the day, but they never got to do a Star Wars film together. Cushing sadly passed away in 1994. So when in fact, the role of Grand Moff Tarkin was originally offered to Christopher Lee in 1976, but he turned it down and later said it was one of his biggest regrets. Cushing and Lee obviously were very good friends before his death, so it was nice that he finally got a chance to do a Star Wars, basically, here, Christopher Lee. And I think Christopher Lee does a good job. He knows what movie he's in here. It's like a hammy script, hammy dialogue, and he's just playing into it being hammy, and that works really well. I think Dooku's performance is really good. So, yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Mm-hmm. It's stated that some of the original scripts for this movie had the joking title of Episode 2, Jar Jar's Big Adventure. Just to piss people off, I guess. So, it's pretty good. So, at George Lucas's request, due to not being happy with his own romantic dialogue for the scene, the entire aggressive negotiations conversation during the dinner scene between Anakin and Padme was ad-libbed by Hayden Christensen and Natalie Portman. Portman has often joked that the improvised dialogue often quickly became inappropriate during various takes, so they had to really snip that down. It doesn't surprise me. Well, if we go back to that, there wasn't a script until a week before the fucking movie started shooting. Yeah, I can believe that he was sat there like, this dialogue doesn't work. Make it up, I guess. Terrible.
Well, because it feels like what has been termed, I believe, in the industry as a vomit draft, where you just basically vomit out the script, just put it on the page, just the dialogue is not how dialogue should sound. It's just you're putting what they need to say, and that's how this film feels.
Yeah, that's exactly right. This film feels like a vomit draft that needed reworking, like from the ground up. Agreed.
Yeah, which, if he delivered it so late, it may well be that.
Yeah, because I think that trivia from the beginning said that he had his first quote-unquote rough draft just 3 months before the movie was supposed to be in production. And at that point, they're already designing sets and characters based on the rough draft, because they have to. You got to make the sets. You can't just go, here's the script, we're shooting tomorrow. So he will have had to have been working to, like, what was in that rough draft will have had to have been a lot of this.
Well, it blew my mind when I realised, because I was like, oh, there really isn't much Jar Jar. And that's when I sort of looked up and realised that the film was like written and put together after Phantom Menace had came out. And that just blew my mind in a modern world of, the train is moving on The Last Jedi before The Force Awakens comes out, sort of thing. And that's just how things are done now. Like if it's a trilogy that has been commissioned, it is constructed pretty much at the same time. Now, obviously, there is still room to change course, Rise of the Skywalker, but it completely threw me that, it literally, Phantom Menace came out, and then he started working on this. Yeah.
And what's crazy, I think, about that as well is, there was a 3-year turnaround. That was it. Phantom Menace comes out in 1999, this comes out 2002. So it's not even like he spent, a long time putting this together. It's a reasonable turnaround for any movie. So yeah. But of course, reshoots were needed because everything seems to have been a mess. Actually, one thing I want to slip in is it's not in the trivia, but it's relevant to what we were just talking about. There's apparently, I didn't end up putting it in the trivia. I cut it because I was trying to keep this tight. But there was a piece of trivia where he went on a tour of the sets and realized they'd built an entire set for a scene he'd cut ages ago. And they had to they had to figure out a way to shift that set so it could be something else that he could use for a scene later on. Ridiculous. That genuinely happened. It says a lot about the production of this movie. So reshoots were performed because, of course, they needed reshoots for this mess. From March 2001, during this time, a new action sequence was developed, further featuring the droid factory after Lucas had decided that the film lacked pace. So the sequence had a rushed previs, and the live-action footage was shot within 4.5 hours. That sequence, Chris, is the droid factory sequence. They just brought them in to green screens, shot it in 4 hours, and then animated the rest around them. The entire droid factory sequence. But it's not the only thing that was added later. It's ridiculous. But the final battle, basically, 90% of the music heard is a temp track from John Williams' score of Phantom Menace. This is because the droid factory sequence and the clone battle were late additions to the film. After making the film, Ewan McGregor appeared in a movie called Black Hawk Down, which he was required to be clean-shaven and an extremely close buzz cut, which you can actually see when you watch the documentary for this. When they're interviewing Ewan McGregor, he's got the shaved short hair and no beard. The new scenes that were required when they did the reshoots, though, meant that they had to put a wig and a fake beard on Ewan McGregor because he didn't have the time to grow it back. So you can often distinguish what's original shoot and what's reshoot based on Obi-Wan's hair and beard if you watch it throughout the movie. It's fake and very obviously fake in several scenes. The exchange concerning the Changeling in the Outlander Club, the Jedi Temple talk between Obi-Wan, Mace Windu, and Yoda, and his interrogation by Count Dooku are all scenes in which he had the fake beard and hair, and it does look pretty bad. So, while on location... Oh, God, George. While on location in Tunisia, George Lucas made a shot intended for use in Episode 3. Now, there's actually footage of him in Tunisia talking to the camera about this, where he explains he can't tell you what the shot is, but it meant he wouldn't need to return to Tunisia. And someone asks, what if you need another shot? And he says, then I don't get it. So he was very adamant he wasn't returning to Tunisia. So he shot something with the intention of using it in Episode 3 while there for this movie, right? The problem is, the scene in question was Obi-Wan delivering baby Luke to the Lars homestead. Ewan McGregor was not in Tunisia because Ewan McGregor isn't in any of the Tatooine scenes in this movie. So they just had a hooded guy hand the baby to Owen Lars. But once they started producing Revenge of the Sith, they decided that Obi-Wan should hand the infant to Aunt Beru, not Owen. So they just completely refilmed it in front of a green screen and binned the footage they got in Tunisia.
For God's sake.
The original shot wasn't used at all. And it has led to a very funny story, which you could look up. Ewan McGregor describing filming that scene, not knowing what he was going in to shoot that day. And it was the day a lot of his friends were in town. And he brought them to the set of Star Wars. And all it was him on a green screen pretending to ride a horse and then hand a baby over to someone. In front of a green screen.
It's still a cool, but they still would have known the weight of that moment, though, surely.
I guess so. But yeah, he tells it. It's a very funny story, told very well on, I think, Graham Norton. Look it up, it's very good. But yeah, is that not insane that he shot it and he went to the trouble to do it and then didn't even use the footage?
That's amazing.
Oh,
That's
dear
brilliant.
George. What are you doing, mate? According to animation director Rob Coleman, not a single clone trooper suit was ever built. Yeah. I believe that. They all look like they fell out of a video game. Every clone trooper seen in the film is computer generated with motion capture performed by Industrial Light and Magic. And some of their employees actually were the ones running around pretending to hold the guns. They sometimes did wear a helmet or footwear so that they could get a realistic thing of the foot hitting the ground. But almost all of it was entirely computer generated. And it tells. It shows. It shows really badly. Most of the clone troopers wear plain white armor, but obviously senior troopers, anyone who watches the Clone Wars will know, have coloured trim on their helmet and arms. The colour denotes rank. Green means sergeant, blue means lieutenant, red means captain, yellow means commander, and Jedi serve as generals. Pilots do also have yellow trim in their armor, but the design differs from the commanders who also have yellow in their trim. And that rule is mostly, as far as I'm aware, been stuck to by both the canon of the movies and the shows. I've never seen them deviate from that, so good work. Like, someone somewhere wrote that down and then everyone listened. So, great. Hayden Christensen's favourite scene to shoot was the scene in the bar because it was the only one with a real set and not just a green screen.
It really wasn't the dream he wanted it to be, was it?
No, and I just think, here's the thing, right? And you know, I just want to I want to repeat something I said earlier, just because I really want to emphasize this. I do not think CGI is a bad thing, and I am not against a movie of a science fiction nature using fucking tons of it, to the point where I think it is absolutely acceptable that there is CGI in like 99% of the shots in the movie. That isn't the problem. It's the percentage of each shot that is CGI that's the problem. It's what that guy said. The more real things you can get into a shot, the more believable the blends are between the real and the CGI become. Right? Yeah. If the entire background from the ground up is CGI, it stands out with real people stood in front of it. If you build a wall and a bit of sand and maybe put a rock in there or something, to give it a few tangible objects, and then CGI the stuff behind that, it will look a lot more convincing. You just need more real stuff.
Yeah, but the thing about sand, Dan, is I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
But on Naboo, Chris, things are really sort of smooth and soft. So now I'm going to try and kiss you through the microphone.
I don't think... Do I sound like someone you want to kiss at the moment?
Absolutely not. You can keep your lurgy away from me. I do not want to be as ill as you sound right now. We're supposed to be recording another podcast tomorrow, and for listeners, I want you all to be very aware that we're going to have a serious conversation after this podcast about whether Chris is fit to do it. Because I would not have gone ahead with this podcast if I'd have known Chris was so unwell.
That's a lot later than this one. It should be fine.
We'll see. We'll talk about it. Anyway, let's see. Oh, yeah, there's a handful of Star Wars actors that are usually in costumes or under CGI that get to show their faces in the crowd in the cantina scene in Coruscant, the sports bar. For example, let's see. So Ahmed Best, who plays Jar Jar, gets to be not Jar Jar, just himself, and Anthony Daniels, who plays C-3PO. Apparently a bunch of the performers for the R2-D2 puppet are in the scene as well as themselves, which is really fun. Anthony Daniels gives Obi-Wan a gross look after he chops the guy's arm off. That was pretty funny. I like that. That was nice. A nice way to use those actors. This is a famous one, but I'll cover it because otherwise I'll get comments. Why didn't you tell them the thing? Yeah, we know. Samuel L. Jackson wanted the purple lightsaber so he could see himself during the big lightsaber fight. Lucas told him that Jedi only have blue or green. Jackson was like, yeah, but I want a purple one. Lucas said he'd think about it, and then obviously he didn't know what would happen until he went in for reshoots, and then Lucas showed him the scene containing the purple lightsaber, and he was very happy. Samuel Jackson has also said that the words bad motherfucker were engraved onto his lightsaber hilt, which is obviously a reference to Pulp Fiction, and it's pretty cool as it goes. I like that. That's nice. Everyone knows that trivia. Like, that he wanted to spot himself in a big scene with 1,000 Jedi, so he asked for a purple lightsaber. But, if I don't say it, I will get the comments. So there you go.
Yeah, and I think also, it's effective. You hear that and think it's a joke, and then you watch the scene and go, oh, yeah, no, that's fair enough.
Yeah, he's spottable. That's true. That's very true. In the Lars homestead, in the garage, in the space that Luke's original T-16 Skyhopper sat, they have a smaller ship with a similar design that sits part there in this film. But Luke's land speeder is also visible in the garage in this film. The Lars homestead has lots of hints to the original movie that are subtle and in the background, and that is cool. I'm on board with that. The Senate vote to give the Supreme Chancellor sweeping emergency powers to go to war against separatist forces is the exact same ploy Adolf Hitler used to gain similar dictatorship powers during the mid-1930s in Germany. So there you go. Based on a real thing, what happened. And anyone who wants to say Star Wars wasn't woke until Disney bought it can go fuck themselves. When Jango Fett gets into a ship after his fight with Obi-Wan, he bangs his head. Oh, we talked about that one. We don't need to do that one. We've covered it. Don't worry. According to George Lucas, Obi-Wan's hiding in Geonosis' asteroid field is what teaches Boba Fett to use that to his advantage in adulthood, because that's exactly what Boba Fett does in Empire Strikes Back. He hides in the asteroid field and then escapes. So, yeah, I guess that's a little, he learnt it there and then it happened in the other thing. That's a subtle one. That's fine. I don't mind that. as George Lucas
that's
famously once said, "It's like poetry; it rhymes." Even though that is meaningless in the context of these very, very bad films. And
the one where I think it's unnecessary is just because Luke lost his hand. I don't think Anakin needs to lose his hand.
The worst part about that for me is that it's also like because Obi-Wan is like, he's more machine now than man. You know, he's like, oh, I'll start that journey here. We'll lose a hand. He'll have a robot hand. Boo.
Yeah, it's just unnecessary. Like,
well, yeah, because doesn't he loses that arm again in the next movie?
Yeah, it's just It really, I was watching it going and thinking of that quote, like literally thinking of that everything rhymes quote, and just being like, I don't think this needed to rhyme, George. This doesn't add anything to anything.
Absolutely, don't worry about it. Meaningless drivel. It's a thing that happened in that one, and it also happened in this one. Whoa, what does that mean? Nothing. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Meaningless drivel. Anyway, this one's an interesting one. I've always wondered about this, and I saw it in the trailer. I was like, oh yeah. When Anakin is slaughtering the Tusken Raiders, there's a really clear voice that is like Anakin, no. That's apparently Qui-Gon's voice, and apparently it was extremely deliberate. Because according to Star Wars canon, Qui-Gon's Force Ghost is there trying to stop Anakin from succumbing to his rage, but fails. Yeah, all right, I'll buy that. Fine. I mean, it's very clearly there. It's not an accident. You can literally hear another voice saying that, something like Anakin, no. And I'm like, what is that? I've always wondered. And now I know. So there you go. So, this is the one, Chris. This is where you get to feel very clever and very astute for what you said earlier. So according to Star Wars canon, the Tusken Raiders who kidnapped Shmi Skywalker were paid to do so by Count Dooku. He had done this on the orders of his master, Darth Sidious, but this was never revealed on screen. In Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, Palpatine was supposed to reveal this to Anakin during his fight with Count Dooku as the thing that makes Anakin pull the trigger on killing him, but it got left out of the final cut. So you know the scene in the next movie when Anakin's nearly going to kill Dooku and he's like, do it. You know, he wants him to give into the dark side. Apparently, it was a much longer game where it'd been set up here that Dooku was the one who had Anakin's mother essentially captured and then killed. Well, she died, I should say, more than killed, but died as a result of her injuries from being captured. And so he could be like, oh, and he killed your mother. There's a final thing to make him chop off his head. And they took that out. They took that out for some reason. I think that would have made more sense if this movie and would have made the choice in the next movie more powerful. I don't know why they took it out.
I'm surprised that hasn't been shown in Clone Wars or something. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think what's really weird, well, the problem you can't do, unfortunately, you can't reveal it in Clone Wars because obviously Anakin clearly doesn't know that at the start of Revenge of the Sith, and Clone Wars takes place between these two movies, so it's like you can't reveal. Yeah, but I think if the concern was, well, we don't want to overcomplicate it, you already failed at that, so why not have the extra complication? So
I think it also makes way more sense. It's just too abstract at the moment.
100% agree. 100% agree.
It's bizarre.
100% agree. This film, the second in the trilogy, was shot. This one's really interesting. So this one was shot at Fox Studios, Australia. That says immediately after Moulin Rouge. So it was shot on the same stage. Now, Ewan McGregor was in both movies, so he will have gotten off those sets on Moulin Rouge, and a few weeks later, or whatever, gone back to those exact same sets, only now they were Star Wars sets. Now, the funny thing about that, on its own, that is like, oh, that's funny and weirdly convenient for Ewan McGregor. The second film in the trilogy, the original trilogy, I should say, Empire Strikes Back, was shot at L Street Studios in London, right after Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. The Shining has a sequel starring Ewan McGregor. What a weird sequence of events that is. I don't know. I just found that really interesting. Coincidences, they're fun. Ewan McGregor, of course, in Doctor Sleep, which is a great movie. I really think it's very good, and people don't give enough credit. Doctor Sleep is actually good. Shush. I don't want to hear it from any of you. Doctor Sleep's a good movie. Anyway.
How frustrating for anyone that loves this movie to hear you just dismiss claims against Doctor Sleep with a shush.
I don't want to hear it because, like, every time I've heard criticism of Doctor Sleep, they've been nonsense. I'm not doing it. I'm not playing these games. It's a good movie. So let's get to the final bit of this, Chris, which is let's talk about a little bit about the budget and the box office. So with an estimated budget of 120 million, this was the most expensive Star Wars film until Force Awakens, which had a budget of 200 million. So the next one was actually made for less than this one, which is weird. Although if they're making sets and then discovering they don't need them, maybe that is partly why. I'm hoping Lucas was at least a bit more organised for the final movie. But anyway, this was the first Star Wars movie to not be the top grossing movie of the year in North America the year it came out. This actually came third the year it came out, Chris, 2002. Would you like to hazard a guess at what two movies made more money than Attack of the Clones?
2002?
Mm-hmm. There were two movies that beat it in the cinema.
Give me a hint.
One is the middle of a pretty famous trilogy, and the other one is gone.
So would that be The Two Towers?
Exactly right, Two Towers. And the other one was kind of... at the time, I don't think they realised that movie was going to be the start of the next 20 years of cinema.
It's too early for Iron Man, isn't it?
It is too early for Iron Man. You're on the right track, though. You're on the right track.
Oh, is it Spider-Man?
Yes, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Which was I believe the biggest of the year. So it was the only Star Wars movie to not open at number one until 2008 when the animated Clone Wars movie came out, and then 2018 when Solo: A Star Wars Story came out, and then in 2019 when Rise of Skywalker came out, because they all also weren't the biggest movies of the years those came out. I will say that means, for listeners, just rub some gunk out my ear for a second, just make sure everyone we can all hear. That means The Last Jedi was the biggest movie of its year. Interesting. Anyway, just a detail, doesn't matter. So this is an interesting one because this was the sign of things to come, that these movies maybe, after Phantom Menace, people felt a little burnt. Maybe marketing for this one and the press for this one wasn't great. In the end, its worldwide gross was still very good, but compared to the previous movie, not amazing. So it was its worldwide gross was 650 million. Do I have Phantom Menace in front of me? Oh, I thought I did, but I don't. So yeah, on a 120 million budget, it made 650, and Phantom Menace, when my computer decides to catch up, made 1 billion on a 100 million budget. So there you go.
Wow.
So yeah, that's like 3.5 billion, not billion, 350 million more made by Phantom Menace than Attack of the Clones. So there you go. And then
that doesn't surprise me. First one hype, that wasn't very popular. Do you know what I mean? And then I think it picks back up again for Revenge, doesn't it? Well,
it does.
We'll find out
yeah,
week.
but I think it does. But I think the marketing for... it has to, because it's not on the list of Star Wars movies that weren't the biggest movie of each year. So I think we can assume that the next one picks up. But I will say the marketing for Revenge of the Sith was glorious. It was such a good marketing campaign. It all focused on Vader, and Star Wars is back, and it's Star Wars you remember. This is your daddy's Star Wars, they said, which is just a very objectively smart way to market that movie. We'll talk about whether that worked or not in terms of does the movie deliver on that promise to next week. But that is how they sort of framed it, which I thought was really interesting. But this is interesting. In North America, this is the last Star Wars movie to be released on VHS. Now, if that had happened in Europe, I would have been distraught, Chris, because I was determined to have all 6 Star Wars movies on every format I could get them on. So I had them all on VHS, I had them all on DVD, and then I wanted them all on Blu-ray years later. I also tried to look into Laserdiscs, but that just became too expensive. If they hadn't released the final one on VHS, young Dan would have been absolutely apoplectic. I was so... Even though I don't love this movie, or the prequels that much, if I hadn't had them in the collection, I would have lost my mind. Actually lost my mind. I would have so I feel for the kids in America that were doing what I did and collecting it in as many formats as they could get their hands on, because I had the novelizations as well. So like the idea that the VHS for this movie wouldn't have been available to me would have actually killed me. So yeah, it was available, of course, as I mentioned, in Europe and Australia. No one really knows why they chose not to release it in the United States on VHS. Bizarre choice. But very finally, Chris,
so I assume all those have gone now, though. Now that you've moved and all that sort of stuff.
No,
oh really?
They're in storage. They've stayed with me.
Wow, it got saved.
Yeah. I still have my VHS copies.
How much media in sort of the move to Australia, especially? How much like media? How many DVDs and stuff do you think did you throw?
Almost none, and I'll tell you why. Because they're easy to store, because it's just plastic boxes, and they are worth nothing. So it wasn't even worth selling them. Like a week or two before we left, no, more than that, like a month or two before we left, I went into CEX to get something, and a guy came in with like a suitcase full of DVDs, and I was watching them as I was browsing, scan DVD after DVD after DVD after DVD after DVD, and it was just ding, 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 and I could see the till just like adding it up and adding it up. I couldn't see the figure, but I could see it was adding. I was like, God, this guy's gonna get a lot of money. That's a fucking huge collection of DVDs. They were like 15 quid.
Yeah. I was having this argument when we were doing Loftfest, because there's tons up there.
Yeah.
And my sister's like, we should sell them online, and I'm like, it's not worth the postage.
You're
not going to get any money for these.
50p to £1 for most DVDs now. It's crazy. Yeah. Anyway. So I still have my VHS copies of these, and I do have most of my DVD collection. But my DVD collection stopped growing like 5-10 years ago. And it's just the same collection, incomplete. A lot of like shows where I've got the first 4 or 5 seasons, but not the rest or whatever. It's one day. I've always said one day I'll complete the collections properly, and I'll go out and get all those DVDs. But they're in storage. They're one of the few things I did salvage.
Did you narrow down the number of copies you have of Run Fat Boy Run?
Good question. I actually don't know. If memory serves, didn't you end up making it so I had a third copy of Run Fat Boy Run?
I think I did, yeah. I think my intention at one point was to just keep sneaking copies of Run Fat Boy Run.
So there's a movie called Run Fat Boy Run, which I didn't care for. It's a Simon Pegg movie. And for those who don't know the story...
we'll get into it at some point. We can't not. That's the new... For a while it was Good Burger. It was when are we going to get to Good Burger, and then it was when are we going to get to... I can't remember, but there was something else. Now it's when are we going to get to Run Fat Boy Run. That's now the T.
Because I didn't care for the movie.
And I'm going to... What I'm going to do is I'm going to keep hinting at it and then choosing other movies like it. So I'll big it up and then I'll be like, so we're choosing Brittany Runs a Marathon.
So I didn't particularly I didn't feel any hatred for it. I just didn't enjoy the movie. Right? It was gone as quick as I.
No, it's not very good.
It's not a good movie. And I put it on, didn't care for it, but I borrowed it from a friend, and then the case got damaged. So I had to replace it, and I bought them a new copy, but then they moved away, and I had no way to get the copy to them without running it through the post, which ran the risk of it being damaged. So I had their copy, their original copy that had gotten damaged, the replacement copy they'd never received. They weren't fussed or chasing me about it at all. So I just had 2 copies of a movie Chris knew I didn't like on my shelf. And Chris was like, why have you got... I know you don't like that movie. Why have you got 2 copies? And I told the story, but Chris was like, almost not listening. I could see his little gleeful eyes glaze over, his little mischievous little thinking kicking in. And I believe at some point Chris gifted me a 3rd copy. So I don't know if I still do, but I definitely at one point had 3 copies of Run Fat Boy Run.
I don't know if I gifted it. The plan was certainly to just sneak it
into the I'd be like, Dan, I thought you didn't like that movie. You've got 3 copies. I do think at some point we did run a bunch of DVDs that I didn't Like that, I was just like, I have no use for that. Like I'm never going to watch that again. In a box and then to a charity shop, so they could make some money for charity. Right. So it's possible the Run Fat Boy Runs went to charity because I doubt I would have felt much, need to keep those. But yeah, anyway,
I think I've got one of your beloved box sets. I mean, with it, we should get back to Star Wars, but I think at my mum and dad's is Studio 60. Yeah,
I wondered where that had vanished to. That is a precious one because I don't think they make that anymore. But anyway, it doesn't matter. It's time, Chris, for Cars Exist. And if you're thinking, Dan, how can you do a Cars Exist during a Star Wars segment? Star Wars doesn't have cars. Well, the yellow speeder that Anakin and Obi-Wan used during the chase scene is inspired by the yellow 32 Ford Coupe from George Lucas's 1973 classic American Graffiti. Boom. You've been Cars Existed.
No.
That's everything. We did it. We did it in better time, I think, than the previous one. Maybe not. What are we, 2 hours and 20 minutes in? Anyway, thank you, everyone, for listening. You can get us all the usual places. We've got a Patreon if you'd like to support us financially. It's patreon.com/nothingbutstatic. Not with you, Nick Cage. Patreon.com/nothingbutstatic. You can email us if you've got thoughts, mail@nothingbutstatic.co.uk. Or if you head over to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/nothingbutstatic.uk, that allows you to, you can comment on the video that we post of this podcast, which is, there's no visual of us, but it's just a logo or a videotape going around. But you can use that as a format to comment and give us your thoughts on this particular podcast or this particular movie. Otherwise, you can support us just by interacting with us on the various platforms. If you're listening to us on a podcast platform of your choice, head over to that and like, subscribe, review, whatever format they have, hearts, ticks, pokes, whatever they do. That helps. Tell a friend. That helps. You got a friend who loves Star Wars but hates these bloody prequels and would find it cathartic to hear two people rant about it for several hours. Send them our way. That's cool. Someone who loves them, who you're like, look, here are all the things that are broken with it. These two random people are going to tell you. I tell you now, they will not believe it. They will still defend them. But it might be fun to watch them be annoyed. So share with your friends. Or, of course, you can just keep listening. That supports us too, and we very much appreciate you doing that. Obviously, it's my choice. No mystery as to where we're going next week. I'm choosing, Last Jedi. No, kidding. We're doing Revenge of the Sith. I'm really excited about it. My memory is that so my initial feelings coming out of that one was that it was the best of this trilogy, but I'm reframing that now, wondering if maybe it's still going to end up being Phantom Menace, which would end up being quite ironic. But I've suspected for some time that maybe I was a bit tricked by the movie's use of nostalgia in my youth, and I don't think I've reassessed it since. So I've seen it since.
No, but I do have faith though that it is better than this movie.
Yes, yeah, oh yeah. I don't think it's a question of it being worse than this one, because I'm already remembering scenes from that movie that I remember being really powerful and working really well, and and being really effective at what they're doing. So I think I get the feeling maybe Lucas spent a bit more time on the script for the next one, just based on my memory of it, but we'll talk about it next week. So if you want to hear how that turns out, how we feel about it when we come and look back at it, that is the thing to do. If you're on our Patreon, you get episodes of it a week early. So you can actually, if you're listening to this on like iTunes or Spotify or any of those, and you're thinking, God, I could really love to hear that, for as little as $1 a month, patreon.com/nothingbutstatic, you could hear it right now. But yeah, thanks everyone who supports. We love you dearly, and anyone who just keeps listening, we love you dearly too. Anyone who's not listening, you don't hear this, but we love you too. You just don't know it.
Absolutely we do.
You just don't know it because you're not listening. So yeah, thanks everyone. I'm going to hand over to Chris because he's the one who ends these.
Yeah. My name's Chris Billingham.
My name's Dan Doolan.
And this review has been rewound.